Evening and happy 2022 to all. Thank you so much for joining us this evening in our task force meeting. We'll give it a couple of more minutes and get Member Hamady on before we start moving the agenda forward. So if you could just be patient and we'll wait for him for a couple more minutes. Thank you. All right, it looks like we're ready to go. So we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and we'll start with the roll call, please.
Member Downs?
Here.
Member Gary?
Here.
Member Hamady?
Here.
Member Johns?
Here.
Member Leon is absent but excused. Member Locke?
Present.
Member Newton?
Here.
Member Oliver?
Here.
Member Wong looks like absent. And Member Wright?
Here.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you all for coming. I also want to recognize that this is the beginning of the Chinese New Year. I do know that we have a member that is here with us tonight, that he is spending his time with us instead of family. And we appreciate you, Member Locke, for coming on and being part of the process. And hopefully we won't keep you very long and you'll be able to join your family. So I do want to acknowledge that and thank you for jumping on this evening. With that said, we'll open it up for public comments. Looks like we have one. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeremiah, and I have a question. What barriers have been put in place to make it difficult on a citizen to recover body camera footage of an incident that happened to a citizen? Recover body camera footage, recover photos. It's been brought to my attention. It's been brought to my attention that a member of the community has over 50 bruises on their body from the Albany Police Department. And the Albany Police Department gave some sort of penal code from the government as an excuse to not release those photos. Now, I believe it's police brutality. What has the police got to hide if they're not releasing these body camera videos or simply photos? Now, it's brought to my attention that when this gentleman went to the police department on his own and actually requested an officer to take photos of his body, of all the bruises. The officer says, okay, takes a bunch of photos. The member of the public submits a public records request to review the photos. The police department denies the public records request and withholds the photos. It's kind of odd, don't you think? Why would the police be hiding? Why wouldn't they release the photos? What are they hiding? Why not release the photos? Why not? You got a public records request to release the photos. So there's something going on behind the scenes. And I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. Because no way should a citizen of our community receive over 50 bruises on their body with the police department withholding all the information so nobody could see it. Very untransparent, don't you think?
All right, thank you so much for your comment. Next, please.
Signe Matson here. I just have a question. I tried to go on the city website to see paperwork on the Bonita House best practices report. Also, Professor Oborn, and then the Reimagining public safety report and the budget report. And on all four of those, there was no data available. So I couldn't access any of the paperwork on those items. And I just wondered why.
All right. Thank you so much for your comment. Is there anyone else? And do you want to respond to the last commenter about the documents? Were we having trouble with the system or anything?
No, there was no, I did not receive any subcommittee written report. So the subcommittee, I'm assuming, will give verbal reports here. In terms of the presentation, I did receive from Professor Osborne presentation slides right before the meeting, and it is uploaded as soon as I received it. So if you refresh your agenda, refresh the meetings page, it should come up.
All right, thank you so much, Anne. All right, are there any announcements before we move on to the presentation? All right, so now we're down to line number 5 with the presentation. So we have 2 presentations tonight. I'm basically, both of these individuals, just going to talk in general about the task force, the importance of it, and just provide some perspective in order to help us to get ourselves in the direction we want this task force to be. Once we have been, the presentations have been completed, we'll go ahead and jump into the reporting from the subcommittees and formulate our information so we can document everything for council to review. That is the hope, that is the goal. So with that said, I'm going to step back. I'll allow Ms. Samantha to present her presentation to speak a little bit about the Bonita House, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Hello, I am Samantha Plateau. I am a CATT clinician with Bonita House, so I currently work on one of their mobile crisis teams. I was asked to step in for Dana Cook, who is the program manager and director of strategic planning and mobile crisis for Bonita House. I was told simply to give a little history about mobile crisis and then answer any questions that may come up through the course of the meeting. So currently, Bonita House is running one mobile crisis program. As I said, it's the CATT program, which is the Community Assessment and Transport Team. That is a clinician and an EMT who are partnered together and respond through 911 dispatch, rather than a direct line mobile crisis team that has like its own 1-800 number, like the county has for their mobile crisis program. We have learned a ton working on this program, and it has a lot of wonderful attributes in that we can transport people, which is outside of the norm for many mobile crisis teams. And we've found some bumps along the road in things like training dispatch to screen our calls so that we're getting calls that are really, mental health related, along with working within the emergency medical service system and how we're learning to collaborate around what mental health can do and support in the community and what it can't do and can't support in the community. Overall, it's been exciting and a steep learning curve for sure, but it's been great in a lot of ways. I was told to discuss that one of the main success, or maybe that's not quite the right word, one of the main contributors to success for a mobile crisis team that works in the emergency management system, so is being dispatched rather than having a direct line, is really that aspect of training dispatchers to screen our calls, because it's what helps maintain our safety if we want to remove police from the equation. That ability to assess for what is happening on scene, what the actual need is on scene, and then being able to get further information about the environment, weapons, level of agitation, that sort of thing, and how it's connected to mental health tends to be the biggest signifier in our ability to respond quickly and maintain everybody's safety on scene.
All right, thank you, Samantha. We'll go ahead and open it up for the members to ask any questions or just get any clarification on any information that Samantha has brought forth tonight. Go ahead, Member Newton.
So I'm not sure I understand that you work with the police or outside the police. I mean, you said the calls for the 911 calls come to you.
Yes. So we currently are only dispatched on scene by police. So the 911 call goes through police dispatch, then officers are sent to the scene and make the determination that it's a CATT call, and then we show up on scene. Once we're on scene, we can release the officers. So we take over liability and managing of the safety of the scene. So we can ask the officers to leave and they can go deal with other things. But it is so far, we are only called to scene by officers.
Okay, and when it's just, you say it's just one team, when are you available?
Our current hours, technically we have shifts from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., but to support documentation, our teams get 45 minutes at each end of the shift. So it's really about like 8 to 10, Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week.
And dedicated to Albany?
Nope, we do not serve Albany at this time. We we could, if I understand correctly, but the city has to agree to our contract, basically. We could serve. We currently are primarily in Oakland, Hayward, San Leandro, Fremont, in that kind of area of the county. We don't make it out to the East County yet. We're not in Livermore, Pleasanton, that sort of area. And we don't cover Berkeley because they have their own mobile crisis team.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else? Go ahead, Member Hamady, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to how that system has worked as far as having the police have to take the call and then go to the scene and then decide, whether CATT is appropriate. One of the solutions we're contemplating is having an independent dispatch staffed by clinical experts who could then make that determination without having to get the police involved at the outset, depending on, some criteria that would help them make those decisions. I wonder if you could talk about your thoughts on whether, having that kind of system would be beneficial or would it be problematic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say one of the primary friction points in having us be called to scene by police directly is that we end up getting underutilized. Since officers can write holds and they are under pressure to move very quickly, right? They have lots of calls. They're always trying to get to the next one. They can run up on the scene and make the decision to write a hold before calling us because it seems obvious or they want to move along, where potentially there was a clinician involved who can sit on scene for 2 hours and really work through what's going on and engage in resources. That person might not have ended up on a hold. So I think that's one of the difficulties, is that sometimes we end up on scene with officers and we write a hold that the officers wouldn't have written because I've now spent an hour talking to somebody and come to an understanding of the severity of their mental health issues and that they're unable to care for themselves. And the flip side, that sometimes officers just write a hold because they got to move on and the person says they want to die and that's that. And they don't have the time or the opportunity to actually sit and work with the person to see if that's the best resource. For our program, the determination was made to have officers call us on scene for 2 reasons. One was it made the EMS side, so the EMTs, that side of it, feel more confident in safety. They felt like if officers were there first, that we would know it was a safe scene when we were coming onto scene. Also, in the very beginning, there was talk around train dispatch to screen calls for us to dispatch correctly. It was determined at the time that that would be too much of an arduous task to train dispatch. And so they made the determination that they would let officers be the ones who make that determination rather than dispatch itself. I know Solano County is doing something similar to what you're discussing, where dispatch is sending teams directly. And they had a long training period where clinicians were sitting with dispatchers on the phone, going over the calls, helping them learn what would be good for the mobile crisis team and what would require police involvement. I personally have worked both systems, where officers go first and where I go first. I think if dispatch is trained well and or dispatch kicks the calls to a clinician run line so the clinicians can screen for safety, that can be very successful. And then as long as there's a good relationship with police, you still have to have a good relationship with police, because there's who are coming when it goes wrong. They're our backup when we need help. So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I think it can be very successful to go without police first.
Let me jump in. Samantha, if you can tell us, how are you guys trained? What type of training program and what that entails?
Yeah, so currently for Bonita House's program specifically, there is, hold on, I'm trying to remember how long it is. Sorry. It's at least a week-long training that we go through. It covers two areas. So when they train the EMTs and the clinicians at the same time. So there is some here's mental health diagnoses, here's what you're going to look at, what symptoms, that sort of thing for the EMTs who might not have that background. And then it moves into de-escalation, patient rights, the legality of writing a hold, what that actually means, those sorts of things, along with other resources and tools in our toolkit, essentially, that we can use to try to avoid writing the hold, because the goal is always to use the least restrictive option. So that's about a week long, lots of presentations, lots of speakers, that sort of thing. In addition to that, we also all go to CIT, which is Crisis Intervention Training, that's done through Oakland PD. So we do that training with officers. That again focuses primarily on how mental health diagnoses will present in the people you'll see, ways to de-escalate and support, somebody calming down and being able to hear what's going on and make better safety decisions. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That's about it. We haven't been able to implement it yet, but we do have a policy for a shadowing program, so that new clinicians, EMTs, when they get hired, after they've gone through their training, they start going into the field, that they shadow for a certain amount of calls, and then they have to, with a veteran team, and then the veteran team watches them, gives them feedback, and once they feel as though they've successfully managed a scene themselves, they're released into the wild to run by themselves.
All right, thank you so much. Member Locke, go ahead, please.
Yes, I think you covered this briefly in the previous question, but I want to circle back to this. What do you see as some of the comparative advantages or disadvantages of having law enforcement or sworn officers being the gatekeeper or the decision point of whether or not the CAT teams are triggered? So in other words, if in the system that you cited in Sonoma County, where or Solano County rather, where CATT can be the first on site, are there any disadvantages, safety concerns, liability concerns that you've either identified in your experience or that you've heard from your colleagues?
Yeah, so the primary defense for having officers go first or be the decision point is safety. The idea is that if they get there first, that they can assess for safety, make sure there's no weapons, the scene's secure, and then when we come on, that's a thing that we don't have to worry about. In my experience, scenes can change rapidly. You can have someone who is extremely cooperative and you allow officers to leave and you're there for 30 minutes and the whole thing changes and it is now a high risk, highly agitated situation, someone is triggered by me or my partner, and it can just, now you're calling officers back because you need help and it's a problem. But for me, that risk exists, period. I may always at some point need an officer on scene. That's just the way it is. I am interacting with somebody who is potentially very high, very psychotic, very upset, whatever, which makes them unpredictable. So they are presenting in front of me potentially cooperative one moment and they can be agitated the next. And that's just a piece of the job. That's our bread and butter, really, in mobile crisis, is managing those potentially unpredictable situations. So officers sometimes on scene can be the thing that keeps the person cooperative, right? They hold that authority, they're that symbol of power, and sometimes people will respond and be appropriate, and we can actually get them help because an officer is staying on scene and they've decided that they're going to cooperate because an officer's there. Sometimes they won't talk to us because there's an officer there, and I have to get rid of the officer to get the straight story so I can actually get the person the correct resources, because someone won't tell me what drug they've taken or what they really need or that they've been assaulted because there's an officer there and they don't trust them. So I don't know if there's really a perfect situation personally, and this is not a Bonita House thing. This is me as an experienced clinician. I prefer not having officers on scene and being able to call them if I need them. I find it works better for confidentiality, for someone to open up to me, for me to be able to build rapport. But it does mean I'm taking on a greater risk in managing the safety of the scene myself and not having officers go first. Does that answer your question?
I guess what I hear you saying is that there is sort of a necessary interdependence between police and your function, right? That one sort of depends on the other, or can leverage the comparative advantages of one or the other. My initial question was, what are the potential advantages and disadvantages? I think you just answered that perhaps it goes towards confidentiality, the ability to gain entry with folks at the scene, et cetera. But do you identify perhaps an additional safety concern if you are first on scene, and then have to sort of reverse that order of operations, right? If CATT is first on the scene, and then later on would have to call for police, does that expose not only yourself, not only the responders in your team, but also perhaps the community member that you're engaging to additional safety considerations? And I guess that was what I was trying to get towards.
Yeah, I think the answer is, unfortunately, it's sort of a therapist-y answer. It depends. Absolutely, right? If you have a mobile crisis team that does not feel confident in their ability to assess the scene for safety and to de-escalate, and doesn't necessarily feel confident in their dispatch's ability to assess for safety before they get there, yeah, you can end up in a situation where you have an escalated anxious team that ends up calling officers back in an escalated anxious way, and it can create more of a scenario than potentially is needed. I think where the weight really falls, for better or for worse, if you want to run a team without police on scene, is dispatch. If you have a good protocol for screening for safety, that makes a big difference a large portion of the time. If you're screening for safety, when you're sending out your mobile crisis team from dispatch, covers, are there weapons in the home? You need to put your dogs up. You got to put away your drug paraphernalia, right? That can make a big difference than the safety on the scene. If it's wobbly, right, or if dispatch is overworked and they just can't do the full screening that day, whatever, then yeah, you can end up in a situation where you're sending out a team and now they have to manage something that's just more escalated. And then if they call police back, it's coming back in a more escalated way. And then there's, it could be a mess.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Member Wright. You're on mute, Member Wright.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
I think you might have answered some of my questions. It's kind of a broad, like, what if I'm going to ask. What are the changes that Bonita House is considering in improving their program? And if you were tasked the program, what would you recommend, given your experience? So there's two questions.
For the first part of the question, I don't actually quite know what Bonita House's new program is going to look like. So I don't want to answer that and misspeak. But for what I would recommend, I could give you that information. I am comfortable and I advocate for direct dispatch. I think it makes a difference in our ability to, it gives us a wider berth of people we're seeing. It allows us to spend time with people who may have been put on a hold very quickly by PD that I can now resource with, de-escalate, and get connected so that they don't end up on a hold. So I support that. And whether it be, because there's two ways that direct calls are getting dispatched nowadays. So one is, as we call 911, and 911 dispatcher gets the information, they get on the radio, they say, CAT 31, you're going to this address, and then we go. There's another way that it's being done right now in some counties, which is what I talked about before, which is where dispatch is going, okay, that sounds like a mental health call, and clicks it over to the line for the mobile crisis team, and that mobile crisis team then finishes their screening and then dispatches themselves. I personally advocate for that second system where the clinician gets to like, okay, let's talk about safety and like manage it. Because then you also know what you're going into. You've now talked to the reporting person. You now know the scene you're going to. You've gotten to ask the questions that you as a responding team need to ask to feel safe on scene, and then you can go. I guess I like to be in control instead of thinking about it. So that would be my personal preference, though I think both are okay, particularly if there's an extra training and they're sending mental health folks with dispatch to make sure they're getting trained properly to screen for safety. I personally think that's the way to go. And then, you do your marketing with PD so they know who your mobile crisis teams are. They know what you're doing. They know that you might call them and what that means. And you have agreement from, the chief of police in the city, that sort of thing. They're going to back up these mobile crisis teams and you get that sort of bridged relationship. And then the mobile crisis teams go first and call PD if they need them.
All right. Thank you, Samantha. We'll go ahead and we scan the public to see if there are any questions. We do have one. We have 3 minutes, and go ahead, Ann, and open it up.
Hi, this is Margie Marks. When you say put the person on hold, are you talking about a 5150, like mental health, or are you talking about arrested? So what are the outcomes of the work that you do? Like sometimes the person is satisfied and you just walk away, or sometimes do they agree to the 5150, or can you kind of explain that, what you meant by that? Thank you.
Go ahead, next, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm just wondering a few things. There's talks of so many people getting involved, the police department, intervening with mental health issue. I just don't think the police are the right people. I think the fire department, I think we need to work with the fire department, the paramedics. Because in my eyes, those people are, let's say someone's 5150'd. Who picks them up? Well, it's the Albany ambulance. It's the Albany Fire Department, right? So if the Albany Fire Department and paramedics are involved anyway, I think we need to put a lot of resources and cooperation and collaboration with the trifecta here. I know this is a police task force, committee, but it's also about finding a solution. So that's my 2 cents, is that, we can do all this work and we can hire companies and spend all this money and do a lot of trial and error, what works. But long term, We need to create jobs in our local community with our fire department and our paramedics, and update that. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you so much for your comment. I believe that's it. We'll go back in. So Samantha, let me get Member Newton, and then if you can answer Ms. Mark's question, please. Go ahead, Member.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask her
Oh,
to do. I don't understand what a hold is either.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Samantha.
My sincerest apologies. I used jargon. You are correct. A hold is a 5150 psychiatric hold. So I have removed someone's rights because I have said that they are either a danger to themselves, others, or gravely disabled, which means they can't care for themselves at all. So hold on. Sorry, I was taking notes. Let me look at my notes. Because you had more to your question. Oh, yes. So with the current mobile crisis team I'm on, which this also goes to the second question, we transport ourselves. If a person is considered to be safe and cooperative, whether they are on a psychiatric hold or not, we take them to the hospital or to home, to a shelter, to wherever they need to go. That is, we get to problem solve. And I would advocate, because it really empowers your mobile crisis teams, that if you create a team on your own, that you create a team that can transport. Now, that does not mean that we have not called an ambulance in the past because we've needed to. And often we do work with fire, if that's the city we're in, or the larger privatized company that's in Alameda County, which is Falck. But we do sometimes call ambulances if for whatever reason the person is unwell and or is so upset or agitated, we need support outside of police. If I'm calling police on scene because I have said someone must go to the hospital, it is only so that they can help us get the person in the ambulance. It is for no other reason.
All right, Samantha, I have one more last question. As far as your role with coordination of other organizations, if you could speak a little bit further to that and follow through and percentages, can you give us some type of numbers on how the mobile crisis have helped the community with your services?
Yeah, so our particular team was created specifically to try to reduce the numbers of psychiatric holds in Alameda County. We are one of the, as you guys probably know, we are one of the busiest counties in the United States for psychiatric holds. And I think the busiest in California, if I remember correctly. So we were created to try to reduce that, to get on scene and get involved so that we could keep people out of the hospital and get them engaged with other resources. So we engage with resources really in two ways. One is on the ground in the field. So this is where I'm going through my binder of shelters, community-based organizations, detox centers, crisis stabilization units, all these various things that exist in Alameda County so that I can get someone help somewhere that doesn't involve me putting them on a hold and sending them to John George, which is the psychiatric facility in Alameda County. And then in addition to that, we're always trying to build relationships with resources. The most difficult part of the job for sure is accessing resources for people. Right now, all of the shelters in Alameda County are on a lottery system because there's so many people trying to get a bed. So there's nowhere I can take someone to a shelter where they're guaranteed a bed any longer. They are guaranteed their name on a list, and then they may get a bed that night, but they may not. So trying to engage in getting someone connected to longer term housing, getting someone connected to therapy, getting someone a phone, getting someone food, just all those very basic resources is something that we deal with every day. And I will tell you, most of the time, I am unable to connect someone to resources. There's no space, they're not available, it's off hours, whatever. But it's one of the most difficult parts of the job. I personally am not currently acting as a liaison between any of our resources. I'm simply in the field trying to get people to where they can go to get them help. For numbers wise, I don't want to give you an actual number because they're not in front of me, so I don't want to give you the wrong info. I do know that we have had an impact on the holds in 2021. They've gone down by a certain amount. It wasn't a ton, if I remember correctly, but it was a trackable, evidence-based impact that holds had decreased in the year that we had been available. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Are there any other members before we let Samantha go? All right. Thank you so much, Samantha, for speaking with us this evening. And if we have any other questions, please we'll send us your information so we can connect with you. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. We're going to bring our next presentation. I want you all to, the information that you're gathered from Samantha and this next presenter, just make sure we're writing, taking notes, because it's going to lead us into finalizing or at least putting our model together, what we would like to see for the task force members to do. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and bring up Professor Albarn. If you'll go ahead, please, and unmute yourself.
Hello. Let me fix my picture. There we go. Hi, everybody. Can you see me and hear me? Yes? Good. Okay. Hello, my name is Kathy Oborn, and thank you for inviting me to your meeting this evening. Let me get my little PowerPoint going here. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an academician, former law enforcement, a mom to 7 children, and a grandmother to 18 grandkids. I'm not necessarily conservative or liberal. I've never tried marijuana. I tend to vote person, not party. I try very hard to listen to issues. I'm a Rotarian, a professional genealogist who helps adoptees find their birth families. I'm a Mayflower descendant, a mother of an Iraqi vet, a great-granddaughter of a Civil War vet, and a third great-granddaughter of an American Revolutionary vet. Half of me is Pacific Islander with family in Hawaii and Tahiti. I'm a baby boomer who grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California in a very traditional family setting, except that my brother and I were adopted and not from the same family, and are ethnically different than our parents. I mention this because even though my differences are not enough for people to immediately figure out what I am, I have over the years been treated differently than my peers. As with most families back in the day, my mom worked hard at being the mom, and my dad worked in a television industry, eventually retiring from NBC after 50 years. My parents always told me I could be anything I wanted to be when I grew up, and I believe that positive message followed me throughout my life, along with my dad's favorite mantra of capitalize on calamity. At the age of 30, after having 4 children and earning my AA degree, I was looking for some different places to volunteer in my community, and I thought about just maybe about a few hours a month helping out, and I thought about, well, what about my local police station? In my volunteer interview with the panel, I believed that I told them how much I try to give back to the community, and they said, you know what, you would make a great sworn police officer, and encouraged me to apply. So I thought, what the heck, what do I got to lose? No worries, so I applied. Well, it cost me my marriage, but that was okay. I graduated from the police academy, and my first assignment was the 1984 Olympics. I found policing to be very challenging, and I loved it. I knew I was making a difference for some people, but not for all, especially the ones that did not want to obey the law. I also realized what a naive world I grew up in before becoming a police officer. Interestingly enough, during my policing years, 6-cell mag lights and chokeholds were acceptable forms of less lethal weapons. That's all changed now, and I believe that policing is much more difficult these days, given how society has evolved. So long story short, I left policing when I sustained an injury which enabled me to retrain for another career. So I chose to return to college and earn my bachelor's degree in sociology and my master's of science in educational psychology and counseling. I was then hired as a dean at the community college where I had worked, and 9 years later I was given the opportunity to become a faculty member, and my task was to create my college's criminal justice program. So now I'm an educator. As an educator, I took advantage of the various resources that could help me be a better instructor. I joined several professional organizations, as well as KG, and KG stands for California Association of Administration of Justice Educators, of which I am now the president. I also have the privilege currently of being a member of the California Commission on Post Advisory Committee, which POST stands for Peace Officer Standards and Training. So I was invited here today to speak with you about the importance of police and community relationships. Let me first give you some background on policing in the state of California if you don't already know. California spends millions of dollars on law enforcement training each year, and according to the California Little Hoover Commission, there is very little evidence to demonstrate what types of training actually achieve intended goals and positively impact police behavior in the field and which do not. Because honestly, it's very difficult to measure performance and measure success in the policing field. Law enforcement training in California has oversight from the California Commission on Post, that I sit on the advisory committee, that was established by legislation in 1959 to set minimum selection and training standards. The Post organization, with more than 130 staff members, functions under the direction of an executive director who is appointed by the commission. The Post program is voluntary and incentive-based. Participating agencies agree to abide by the standards established by Post. More than 600 agencies participate in Post and are eligible to receive services and benefits. So in case you didn't know, California has 41 police academies across the state, which are connected to the California Community College system, of which there are 115 total community colleges in California. California has nearly 700 law enforcement agencies with more than 87,000 full-time and reserve police officers. So what does the research say? Well, the research confirms that strong relationships of mutual trust between police agencies and the communities they serve are critical to maintaining public safety and effective policing. Police officials rely on the cooperation of community members to provide information about crime in their neighborhoods and to work with the police to devise solutions to crime and disorder problems. Similarly, community members' willingness to trust the police depends on whether they believe the police actions reflect community values and incorporate the principles of procedural justice and legitimacy. Back in 2015, the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, hosted a meeting of police and community leaders from around the nation for a day-long discussion of strategies for building trust between the police and the communities. And these are their recommendations. First, acknowledge and discuss with your communities the challenges you are facing. Challenges such as controversial use of force and other incidences, and more specifically, which is very much to what's happening today, when there has been a perceived egregious act of misconduct by law enforcement, we have observed how some communities react to the event and what damage has been done to a community. And on a larger scale, how that act can gain nationwide attention and reduce the trust of the police in general. Other challenges, such as acknowledgement of the history of racial minorities and others who have faced injustices at the hand of the police, and vice versa, at the hand of the community against the police. Also taking steps to reduce bias and improve cultural competency. So as an academician, I really feel the need to interject a comment here. I teach a course called Diversity and the Community in our criminal justice program. It is a course that's also taught at the CSU level. In this course, I facilitate the learning of implicit bias, cultural responsiveness, intersectionality, microaggressions, etc. And at the end of each semester, I always wonder if my students are walking away more culturally competent or not. Honestly, I do not know how one can measure cultural competence, but I do believe that it all comes down to respect. Number 2, transparency. I feel like Captain Obvious here when I say that police and community leaders should let the news media and public know as quickly as possible when a critical incident occurs, and I think that's just common knowledge and good practice. The President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing recommended that to embrace a culture of transparency, law enforcement agencies should make all department policies available for public review and regularly post on the department's website information about stops, arrests, reported crime, and other law enforcement data aggregated by demographics. Number 3, maintaining focus on the importance of collaboration and be visible in the community. So research tells us that it's important for the police to be visible and to know their community. Many people do not interact with the police outside of the context of enforcement, and this is one of the reasons that some police departments have established community outreach offices. Obviously, getting to know the community helps both law enforcement and citizens to break down personal barriers and overcome stereotypes. Personal interactions between law enforcement and community members builds mutual trust, which is essential to addressing neighborhood problems and reducing crime. Some examples cited by the research to help bring law enforcement and community together are adult and youth police academies, sports teams or police athletic leagues, ride-alongs with officers, law enforcement involvement in local school activities, and law enforcement participation in community events. The last part of the research suggests that law enforcement agencies need to present policing as a profession, that departments should work to recruit people who want to become officers based on a realistic understanding that the large majority of time is spent addressing community requests and that actually enforcing the law is a much smaller percentage of their time. Law enforcement agencies should also step up efforts in recruiting and promotional processes to increase overall diversity in their departments and provide regular opportunities for career growth and professional development. Another important topic that is affecting California right now is the recent legislation that was signed into law. Senate Bill 2, it's called the Kenneth Ross Jr. Police Decertification Act. In September 2021, Governor Newsom signed this legislation into law, and due to this legislation, officers can now lose their certification as law enforcement for serious misconduct, including using excessive force, committing sexual assault, intimidating witnesses, making a false arrest or report, or participating in a law enforcement gang. Other grounds include demonstrating bias based on race, religion, gender, identity, sexual orientation, or mental disability. So currently, Post is tasked with deciphering implementation of SB2, but it will be the individual law enforcement agencies or oversight committees or whatever the police department chooses that will be responsible for determining decertification of their officers. There's also AB 89, which revises police officers' qualifications. In summary, AB 89 would require the Office of the Chancellor of the California Community Colleges to develop what they're calling a modern policing degree program with Post and other stakeholders to serve as advisors. And they are to submit a report on recommendations to the legislature outlining a plan to implement the program on or before June 1st, 2023. This bill also requires all police officers hired after January 1st, 2022 to be at least 21 years of age at the time of appointment. This will not apply to current peace officers or any police recruit who is enrolled in the regular basic course as of December 31st, 2021. So let me clarify a little bit on AB 89. Basically, the law would require all new law enforcement officers in the state of California to have earned the modern policing degree, which is not yet figured out, but which would be an AA or an AS degree, that would include not only the requisite law enforcement training, which are called learning domains, but also the general education courses required for the AA or AS degree. And if any of you are familiar with the system, you know that usually around 42 to 46 college units are earmarked for general education courses. So my conclusion, well, first of all, I apologize for not knowing more about the city of Albany and the structure of your law enforcement system. And although I am aware of the resolution to establish a community task force on policing, which you're all attending this evening. Personally, I'm in favor of community oversight. I believe it engenders trust and transparency. I think, communities need more than just a few set of eyes looking at something, and I value the differences of opinion. And I also believe working out the differences promotes working together for a common goal, which also sets an example for others. Honestly, from my heart, being a cop is a very, very difficult job. I believe that most people that choose law enforcement as a career do not have evil intentions to violate anyone's civil rights or to cause them harm. I believe being on the job can taint some officers' perspective about society, and maybe that is where police departments need to focus their energy in terms of improving working conditions for their officers. I know, for example, that there are departments that find rotating their officers to different assignments gives them a different perspective about their community. You know, obviously there is no real easy answer. You know, but there is a saying in law enforcement that I still hear today, and that is, at the end of each day, everyone just wants to go home, end of shift, and not end of watch. And so I just got this last night from one of my students, so proud of him. And he says, "Hi, Professor Oborn, it's Kevin." I deleted his identity. "I was one of your students at Pierce in the criminal justice program a while ago and also at CSUN. I graduated in 2020. I just wanted to update you on my life. I moved to Las Vegas to go to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Academy, and I just graduated on Tuesday. I wanted to tell you that I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for you and all your help this past couple of years. I can't put into words how thankful I am that I was one of your students all throughout these years. If you ever need anything or are in Las Vegas, please give me a call. Also, he's willing to be a guest speaker in my classes."
Thank you so much, Professor Arbor. Do you have any questions, members? All right, I'll open it up for public comment. Go ahead, we have one public comment.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. So you're an ex-police officer. So naturally, you know, I'm just going to be honest. I feel maybe, you know, you could be a little biased toward the police officers. And, but you did try to share how you're a person and you have a big family. You know, but, you know, you're from the force. So it's kind of like, you know, a biased opinion in a way. But hopefully maybe some of your experience isn't biased. It's just experience to be helpful. Maybe you have some insight on how to make, you know, changes in departments. You know, I really listened and you had a lot of good things to say. One thing I do agree with you about is rotating. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, is rotating the positions, because what's happening in Albany is we have the same people that have been here for far too long and they're just stuck in their old ways. And it's hard to make a new change with people that have been here forever. I think the way to make change is, you know, hiring new people, and getting new people. And these new classes, what a great thing. A college class, a college degree, mm-hmm. Not just criminal justice, but yeah, education involved on how to be an officer, you know, a lot of training. So I think that's moving forward. I think that's a great accomplishment there. So I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here. So I'm just wondering exactly, you know, how you're going to help Albany. You know, I just realistically, I know we have a lot to work on. And there's just a lot of talk going on. You know, we're gathering a lot of data right now, and we're talking about how to make changes. I'm just wondering, you know, when, you know, we're going to make these changes and when they're going to become in effect, because every day that goes by, you know, there's people that need mental health and they're just not getting it. And that's sad. I think there should be no waiting list on mental health situations in Albany. You know, so, but I think we're doing an okay job. We're checking out our options right here. So I just think that Albany, we need to take action on our own. We need an Albany mental health program, you know, like Albany Food and Housing. We need our own building, our own. We have Alta Bates Hospital, so maybe they're involved. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Any other public comments? All right, it looks like there are none. All right, I want to thank you so much, Professor.
May I respond?
Yes, you sure can. You can, definitely.
You know what? You're very. It's not unfair of you to assume that just because I was a police officer back in the 1980s, which was a long time ago, that I might have preferences for law enforcement or not. You know what? And the reason that I talked about all my intersectionalities in the beginning is because I think it's important to realize that police officers are people too. And everybody comes from different places and has different experiences. I'm not any more pro-police than I'm anti-police. I'm pro-society. I'm pro-community. I was hurt, embarrassed of what happened in Minnesota, in Minneapolis with that incident and all the other incidents that happen where police are out of control. And I would be the first one to take that to my classroom and say, this is wrong. Those officers are wrong. They should be held to answer and suffer consequences for what they did. That's number one. So, but you know what? That's just, I believe, a mature person looking at an incident and doing the right thing and saying the right thing. In the 80s, obviously most of my training officers were Vietnam vets. I didn't encounter tons of people that were bad cops. There certainly were enough bad cops. I'm sure everybody heard about the Rampart scandal and all that sort of stuff. But and you know what? There's bad people everywhere. In every walk of life, there's always bad people. What makes it so difficult in law enforcement is that we rely on these people for our lives. And we need to be able to trust them, and we need to be able to work together. And so whatever that looks like, if that looks like through a committee like this, a task force, or whatever it is you can conjure up, that's what's important. So, and the reason I'm here is because I was asked by the councilwoman to give a perspective, more of an academician's point of view, followed by research about policing and things like that. So anyway, but thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and sharing my information.
Thank you so much, Professor.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
All right, we'll go ahead and get ready to move to line item number 6. And let me just reiterate again, you know, we live in a community where you do have people that are happy with our police. They're excited that they're here, they're accessible, they're around. And then you do have some who are not pleased with the services, and that's okay. But we have to, as a task force, we have to balance this out. Again, if we come in too strong, asking for things to be ripped out of the department, we're leaving out a section of the community that actually wants the police here. We all should be able to find that balance. So that's why I brought Ms. Osborne, so we can look through different lenses, not just one set of eyes and say, let's take everything away. So with that said, I'm going to have a slide presentation put up for us. I'm going to ask Member Downs if you could help me with that. I did try to send it to Anne, but I've been having some computer issues, so I'm not sure if she received it. But we'll go ahead and start. So the first one, we're gonna open up this. Go ahead.
I just received it and I just uploaded it. I did not have a chance to email the committee member, but if you refresh your agenda, it is there.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne. Thank you for letting me know. So here are the steps that we're going to try to go through in putting together a model for Albany, specifically for Albany. We're going to establish this model. I'm hoping by the end of our conversation, we'll be able to put some of the verbiage into a memo to send to the council to be on the next agenda in February the 21st. Next slide. So let's look at the key elements when we're establishing a model to fit our city. We have accountability, transparency, accessibility, public input, and engagement. Those are the things that we should be trying to put together for the committee members to focus on, to work on. Next slide. So what I would like each member to do is, as we go through these models, the elements, I would like us to pick out one or two of the things that we would like to see in the model. I would like the minimum of 10. This will provide us with a collaborative effort to work with council. If we come up with 12 things that we would like for our committee to work on, that'll give options for council to either say yes or no, or add to or take away. That way we can have a robust plan. So when the members are selected, they're ready to go. So if you look on this slide, we're asking, here are some few elements to consider. You know, we could have stakeholders input, full cooperation, disclosure of staff and committee members, right? Ensure individual complaint investigations comply with established policies and procedures. These are things that we may want to interject. So I want you to look at them and figure out which one we want to put together at the end of this presentation. Let's work on trying to put these items together as one. Next slide, please. Here are a few more elements to add or to at least think about. Community engagement, our professor spoke about having public forums if we want that to happen. When we talk about community engagement, one thing that I was considering is, you know, when we have different events, we may want our committee members to go out and just hear from the community, but partner with the police so we can have that working relationship. And I think that's going to benefit our city the most. Next slide. And then all in all, we do need a confidentiality model in this as well. We need members of the committee to, you know, keep everything that is important to the community. If there's anonymous, you know, reporting or anything like that, we have to have some type of confidentiality, because members won't come to the committee if they feel like they're going to be retaliated on, right? And so we don't want that fear. We want to be able to engage with the community, work with the police department, and have this oversight committee reflect our city. Next slide. And then we'll include the budget. We'll have time for the budget to come in, and how are we going to prioritize that budget? Will we have, you know, a community academy? Will we use, you know, funds, you know, for community outreach? However, the budget team, and I'm not going to go into basically analyzing what the budget subcommittee wants to put together, but these are just a few ideas that we may want to consider. So now I'm going to open it up for questioning. The form that was presented at the beginning or the end of last year, I received a lot of, I wouldn't say complaints, but concerns that it was a bit too much. I'll put it in those words. There were a lot of moving parts. It brought some confusion to the members in the community, and they felt that, you know, that their views and their actions were not going to be protected. And so I felt that it was best if we can come up with a model, again, of just a few things that we would like to see, a minimum of 10, and then we would be able to present that to the council and hopefully get a passage of this model. And I will yield my mic for questions. Go ahead, Member Mohammadi.
So I'm just wondering, so where does that leave the Oversight Subcommittee, you know, the resolution they put forward? It did end up that passed, right? So I'm just, did that not did that not do, we didn't get anything done from that? We don't have anything in place that we can then build on. My understanding was that it did eventually pass, that Member Downs authored and presented to council, that whole thing. That didn't happen.
Go ahead, Member Downs.
No, I think you're right, Member Hamady, that the resolution that we introduced a couple times in the fall went to council, got sent back, and then they passed a revised version of it. So I think, it might help. Then Councilmember Gary, it sounds to me like you're looking for clarification, expansion, reinforcement of that. Is that right? Or why don't I say it as a question? What do you see as the relationship?
Right. So the document that was presented by the Reimagining Subcommittee, that is what I received the complaints on, as far as some of the elements of that. Now, some of those elements in that resolution that you drafted, Member Hamady, can be in this type of model.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Okay, so now but this isn't, you labeled it oversight, but we're talking about reimagining, please. So how have we already gotten complaints? We haven't even passed our own version of it yet. So they're already, I said this before, I have no interest in watering something down so they can give themselves a pat on the back. What I'd like to do, we've been condensing it and condensing it and condensing it. And so it's already down to the studs. If they want to, I would like to put it before them and let them vote no, rather than talk about community policing and just let's put the police out in the community and play softball with the kids. The fact that they're already pushing back before it's even gotten to them is telling. But again, 2 of the 5 will be up for re-election, and I would rather have it on record if they're going to say that, no, we want the police involved in every situation. We just had, Bonita House come and provide an excellent presentation. They're already in the community doing this kind of work. And they're saying, they're asking for us to implement something like this. So no, I have zero interest in cutting it down to something that would have a few talking points that the council can then say, see, we acted, we did something. So, no.
So with that thought, Member Hamady, let me be clear. Day, if you're referring to the council member, Day is not who came to me asking me questions about what we put before our task force. So let me be clear about that. So as far as any complaints from the council member, if that's what even the Day is, that is not true.
All right. Well, I apologize for jumping to that conclusion, but I guess I don't know, if we're worried about, again, members of the community that want more police in their lives or are not the kind of people that are going to be victims of police brutality. I mean, I don't know that the task force was formed to, make those people are already doing fine. So we want to uplift the most vulnerable while obviously maintaining safety for the rest of the community. But, I just remember Locke earlier made the comment that, if we adopted the kind of dispatch where the police would not be the first responders necessarily, depending on the situation, that would not only make people like Samantha, who presented earlier, less safe, but also the people responding. And the people calling. And I don't know that someone who is potentially suffering from a mental health episode is going to be safer when someone shows up with a gun than when someone shows up without one. So
Member Hamady, so I'm asking you, and I'm asking the members on the task force, let's customize it so it can pass, right? If you, and this is just my opinion, I think if we put too many elements apart, again, this is a small city, right? We're coming with something new. There are going to be some adjustments, but I think if we go in, and again, my opinion, if it's too aggressive, we're not going to be able to get what we want done. So that's why I'm asking, let's customize something in a way that we can make sure that we balance it out throughout the community, and even getting the community perspective on what they would like to see as well.
Yeah, I guess I just don't, if I look at what the most recent version, it basically, we're calling for a crisis response team
an independent 911 call center, and that's, the rest is basically left to implementation. I mean, we can, if what you're saying is, if you look at the document that was sent before the last council meeting, the latest iteration of the Reimagining Public Safety memo, if we're talking about just cutting everything that's not controversial, that's fine. I mean, if you want to cut, community outreach, repealing, all the programming, technology, we can narrow it down, sure. But I think that's just going to draw, even more attention to what the issue that has continued to bog down this committee, which is, should police be involved in every single call, and it should always be up to police whether police are needed. And I think that's, and we can't really, no amount of customization or, that central question, is sort of has to be addressed. Should clinical experts be able to make a decision at the outset of whether someone needs to come in, a police officer armed with a gun who is not, their first response is not to help or de-escalate? Do we always need those people to be the ones that are there first? And if, regardless of how we package it, that question we kind of have to make a decision on. So obviously you can tell where I stand on it.
So let's pause and let's hear from other members. Any other members have any input at this time?
I think our approach should be not necessarily watering something down, but look at what win we can get. It's sometimes the choice of words we use. We talk about the word like defunding the police. That's one phrase that is, for me, I'm not comfortable with that word, with that phrase, until I understand what it means. So we need to ask ourselves, what is it that we want to achieve? And if it's some form of reform, I think we need to look for where we can get the win without a total loss. So I agree what Member Amity is saying. But what's most important is we need a win, and we have to find that the word compromise sounds very demeaning in this space, but it's not. It's about moving forward. It's okay. I'm Jamaican, so there's a phrase that we use that says, when your hand's in the lion mouth, you pull it out slowly. Right now, our hands is in the lion mouth. Pull it out slowly so we get that win. And if you look at the finance side of it, we didn't say go in and cut this and cut that from the police budget. We went and we look at what their budget was, what they're actually using, what they're not using, and then say what they're not using that they're asking for year after year after year, that slush fund. Let's try and use that slush fund to get what we need out of it. So someone can come and say, well, you asked a cut. We're saying, no, every year you have an extra fund sitting there. So I think we should go back and look at it, and rather than, we should be creative and let them shoot from the hip.
All right, thank you, Member Wright. Member Downs?
I was just nodding. I've already spoken, so if other people want to jump in, I'm glad to. But otherwise, I'm glad. I think I like the point that Member Wright said. In terms of how we make sure that we get a win, that we've spent time, we try and build something that does make meaningful change. I'm also really interested in what's going to be something that's resilient, and so building a system where we really know that we've considered the sort of strengths and weaknesses of our proposal. We've considered, how to respond when it doesn't work perfectly, and in that sense, and we've been able to build up a kind of community support so that when inevitably something goes wrong, it doesn't, it doesn't crumble. Sometimes I think there's a temptation to sort of yeah, so those are the things that I would like. Something that's resilient, something that makes real change, and something that reflects the will of the group. So I'd love to hear from other people.
All right, Member Newton, go ahead, please, and then Member Oliver.
I'm sorry that with Member Hamady, I just don't agree that for us to get something done, that the 911, the dispatch center has to be moved out of police control. I think we've got to, nothing will happen if that is what we insist upon, nothing will happen. And I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I think that the 911 and dispatch center can be trained better and it will work better. And it's in a perfect world, I guess we'd have a dispatch center outside the police department, but it's too big a reach and too expensive. And I would not vote for that if that's the deciding factor.
Okay, thank you, Member Newton. Member Oliver?
Yeah, I would agree that we've focused a lot on the dispatch center, which I think is, although I think it's important, I think that's not necessarily the root of the ideological debate per se or question. Like in my mind, at least, the question is, what is our goal in regards to police? Is our goal to reform the police? Is our goal to divest from the police? Is our goal to improve the police as they are? Is our goal to, have a public safety department instead of the police department? I just think that we've been avoiding having a frank conversation about the root of the matter, which is what is our opinion on this subject? And so I think we've started to focus on the dispatch as kind of a way to argue about that, who should be in control of the dispatch, which I agree is important, but I think fundamentally we might have different opinions on policing as an institution and whether we want anything to do with that, and whether we will, probably for some of us, we can't support anything that is going to be enabling and giving the police more money. And for other people, they can't support anything that is going to be divesting from the police. And I think if that's kind of our ideological disagreement, I think it's better that we just kind of put that out there and have a clear understanding of where everyone stands, because I just think we're using the dispatch as a proxy to gauge people's opinion on the police, when I think in reality we might just disagree, in which case let's just disagree and try to figure out if there's something salvageable or not something salvageable, because we've all put so much time into this. That's kind of my opinion. I'm happy to be transparent about what I will and won't support and what my beliefs are, and maybe other people are willing to do that as well. And so, yeah, I guess that's just kind of my 2 cents. I think that I don't want to use the dispatch as a proxy for kind of gauging various opinions. And I think if there's disagreement, we shouldn't shy away from that. And we should just kind of see if there's an option moving forward.
Thank you, Member Oliver. Member John?
I'm sorry, but I'm a little bit confused here as far as what is being asked to be changed. I know there was the document that we presented that Greg referenced. Now, were there 2 other documents presented after that?
So the Reimagining Subcommittee did present a document, and the Budget Subcommittee submitted a report as well that they were working on. And so in that document, if I don't know if anyone has a copy that we can bring up, but it basically outlined that something as far as accountability that the subcommittee felt that could be implemented underneath the whole Oversight Committee. right? And so what I'm trying to get everyone to understand here today is that we do have an oversight committee. Now, how do we use that, the elements to add the accountability factors? But member right, member down, there has to be a balance. I mean, I know everyone wants to win, but, and like member Oliver said, if we focus too much on one area, we're wasting our time. We have to bring everything back in perspective and see what's important and build upon that. Once we have built upon that and the committee starts working, at that moment, they can go back and say, oh, we see that, you know, the dispatch, there's an area of concern there, or there's an area of concern, you know, in certain areas of the department that are not feasible. That's what we need to be putting in place. If we continue to spin our wheels trying to figure out, you know, how to extract everything instead of build upon, we're not going to be able to get this task in order. And so I'm encouraging you, with the concerns that you have brought forth this evening, to let's put a model in place where it's more accountability and we build upon that.
It has to be accountability and trust.
And trust.
And I go back to, it's a partnership. I'll make this personal and says, where I stand, we need the police. I run a business down by the Trail Road track where I have 2,000 kids coming back and forth. And I just went to work today and learned that there's a guy who has a standing appointment Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Thursday, 4 to 5:30, where he comes and sells drugs. That's what someone told me. I need the police to deal with that. You know, I don't want to take away the police right to investigate that and help support the community. But if I'm standing back and I'm looking at the police talking to this person who happened to be a minority, I could say, well, the police are harassing this person. But we have to get to the facts. So how do we get to a point where when we sit at the table with the police, all of the community information is on the table and we're working with them? It is a relationship. It is not about taking. And I know that part of what we have when we started this a year ago and the conversation started, it was a very charged environment where, you know, the police, you know, but now things has calmed down. We've taken a look at it and now we can look back and ask ourselves and really look and analyze the situation we're in. And we want to be in a position for a small town such as Albany can really find that balance. You know, there are people out there that needs the officers, and there are people out there who are doing things that needs the officer. You know, one of them can be positive, one of them can be negative, but it's a balance. And so what I'm looking for, and I agree, is let's look at the changes that we can get now and the changes that we want in the future. So if you go in to look for something and say, I'm just going to rip this thing apart, you're going to have some resistance. But if you go in and ask yourself, what can I get now to build trust, open communication, and have a balanced, transparent relationship, then we will have a win going forward. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Mayor, or Councilmember Gary, you're
I'm sorry. So I'm going to pause and let us ponder some of the things that has been stated, and let's really try to hone in on what elements that we would like to see for the subcommittee to move forward and work towards, and then we build upon that, and hopefully we'll be able to finalize everything to present something to the council to act upon. So with that said, I'm going to take some public comments, and then I'll bring it back to the members for discussion. Go ahead, please.
Member Gary, I've been observing this meeting, and I respect your role in our community. I'm sitting here watching all the wheels spin in circles and circles, and you're doing your best respectfully to keep this meeting on topic. So for that, I just want to say a few things here. So as far as the dispatching goes, I don't know if everybody told everybody, but, you know, Kensington Police Department pays Albany, maybe, Member Gary, if you could get the facts eventually, but approximately, what is it, every 2 years, Kensington Police Department pays Albany to do dispatching. Was it like $250,000 or something? Or it's like $300,000 every couple years to do our dispatching, to do Kensington's dispatch. So just to let everybody know, Albany doesn't just dispatch Albany. Albany dispatches Kensington. So with that said, maybe we should be asking Kensington for some more money, right? Kensington needs to step up to the game and throw down on this. They need to bring some money to the table regarding dispatching, create another job. Anyway, long story short, there's supposed to be 2 dispatchers. But basically, you're asking us to focus on a few things for discussion, right? Establish Albany's public safety oversight model. That's what we're doing right now. My things are exactly what you have. Transparency, accessibility, and public engagement. It's the slides you put up earlier. Ones I want to focus on, since you asked us to pick a couple, Councilmember Gary, mine would be the full cooperation disclosure, with the police department, and also authorize and audit, monitor, investigate. Basically, everything here is great. I know we got to pick a few to bring to council. Review and address civilian intake by observing interviews. All these are really important. So yeah, regarding dispatch, obviously it's a big issue. We got Kensington involved. And maybe we can create a police officer, one officer on duty at all times as a mental health crisis officer, one specialized officer, or a department within the Albany Police Department, mental health department, or something like that. But I think it just goes hand in hand, straight up with the fire department and the EMTs and the medical people who are going to be dealing with the situation anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Margie Marks. I have a couple of suggestions for you. One is that I know that you've done an incredible amount of research and spent a lot of time on this. So one of the things I would like the commission to do, or the task force to do before you close up, is to make a list of a set of principles, and maybe principles is not the right word, but these are things that we all agree on. Maybe you're not going to ask the city council for them now, but this is what this whole committee, after their time and energy and education, is recommending. And for example, would be, stop hiring new police right now. The dispatch center could be in that. A list of principles that I, as a citizen, 6 months from now, when this group no longer exists, I can go back to that and say, well, this was one of the things that they learned after spending over a year looking at the subject. That would be helpful for me. The other thing is, this has to go to the city council to get passed. I love you, Member Hamady. I feel the same way you do. Like, I want everything and I want it now. But at the last city council meeting, one of the council members, when talking about issues citizens had with the police, actually used the words, and I've heard this person use those words before, if they can be believed, talking about members of the Albany public who have, given testimony about how the police have treated them. And that's the person who's going to be voting on these things that you bring forward. So anyway, I think we have to recognize. So like, I would be really happy as a citizen if you could do some small steps that we could build on later. And that would be, in the principles, like put everything out there, everything you've learned, everything that we would love for our city. And then for your suggestions for the city council, some small steps, like I said, that we can build upon later. And big steps, if you can get them. I mean, I'll be there and support you. You're going to need a lot of public to call in, and I'll be there for you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much, Margie. And I believe that's the last public comment. So I'll bring it back to the members. So basically what Ms. Marks has expressed, what Jeremiah has expressed, that's what we need. That's the whole goal,
is not to rewrite what's already been passed. Let's start listing the priorities. And I think maybe the name of the wording of the title on the presentation threw things off, but basically the elements, what are the priorities, what are the goals? If you want to list 10 things that you want us to present to the council to be a part of that, then let those 10 things. Then we can add another 10 things. But we have to shape this, and our asks have to be put in place. Hold on one sec. I think the timer's still going. Sorry about that, Ann.
Sorry.
That's okay. So that's what I'm asking, that we just come together and list everything out. What I presented here on the presentation are just few things that you know we could work on. But if there's something else you think or you would like to see, let's jot that down. Let's put it together. Let's get it in a memo, and let's get it to the council, and let's get feedback. Then that way they can tell us, no, we're not doing 5 of these, but we will consider 5 of the other things. Then we're getting movement, we're getting traction, and we can revisit it and add to it, take away, or whatever we want to do before our last meeting in March. But I believe everybody wants a win here because we have worked so hard these past couple of months to establish this. Let us not throw the baton down and walk away at this point. So I'm encouraging you guys to look at this and let's put some effort into it before this evening is over. So I'll open it back up for members to discuss. If you want to start listing them out, if somebody could jot them down and we can come up with a list together, that would be great. Member Johns, you have your hand up.
Yes, I in that light, I wanted to support 2 of the things that you presented. The first one being authorize to audit, monitor, etc.
Okay.
As well as receive public complaints.
Great, thank you, Member John. Anyone else? Member Newton?
I'm just sort of a pet peeve of mine, but there doesn't, the chief has explanations for why they can't reveal more information on a daily basis. The public bulletin that they put out is crap. It doesn't tell you anything. It's gotten a little bit better, but not much. And he blames it on systems, and we have to get a new system to do this and do that. And I just have been bugging him for 2 years myself, and we've bugged him. I think we're not very transparent that way. There should be a way for people at home to dial up the city website and look at the police department and find out what was going on in your neighborhood last night. And you can't do that now. So I guess what would that be called?
Anyone have any suggestions?
Well,
Verbiage on that, Mr. Newton? Go ahead.
I may be on my own on this. It's I'm the only person that this bothers, and so it doesn't really make a difference.
No, but I mean, if this is a concern, we let that be a part of the priorities and we find out the language for it. Again, I'm asking each member to put something. So if that's a concern, we can jot that down.
All right.
Member Locke, go ahead. I see your hand.
Is perhaps a way to phrase the concern that Member Newton just expressed as part of transparency, the accessibility of information regarding policing activity. I think that falls under that heading of increased transparency. So maybe that's a way to encapsulate that idea. But I share that concern. When this body first convened, one of the primary frustrations, and that's several of the subcommittees were tasked with looking at, was the availability of data. Oftentimes we found that some of the sources of the data were opaque. And so I think that I share that concern with Member Newton.
Okay.
Anything else, Member Locke, that you would like to add?
No, I would also second the concerns that were first brought up as well by Member Johns.
All right, Member Hamady.
No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Member Oliver.
I don't have anything to add.
Member Wright.
I would go for budgetary transparency and also the inclusion of a crisis responder program, development of a crisis responder program.
Member Downs.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this may relate to the last one Member Wright said, but something that I think, you know, I mean, one thing I think that we've talked about before that I would support is creating a, you know, combined group of, you know, to me, it could be SEJC, a council member or two, you know, someone from our body. You know, we could include Bonita House to really come up with a plan and a, you know, for how to, you know, address and de-escalate and demilitarize engagements with people who are suffering mental health crises. And I think the thing that, you know, has, you know, to the credit of the Reimagining Committee and Member Hamady and the other members, you know, have emphasized that, and that's absolutely right to emphasize. I think what, you know, what I would like is a sense of a, you know, a sort of more programmatic approach that does incorporate, you know, how is this gonna work? And I understand that runs a risk that if one of the people at the table is the department, you know, of course there's a risk of it being, you know, wiped into nothing. And I get that. But I also think that we want a solution that's really, you know, gonna work. And so to me, the sort of way to get from here to there is a task force that really does look at other places, you know, specifically. If it involves dispatch, then we can bring in someone from Kensington and figure out, you know, if, you know, how that interacts. If it involves dealing with Alameda County services, you know, which it might well, you know, we've got experts in the community, you know, there's members of the SEJC and others who've been mental health experts. And I do think it's an absolutely top priority, even if I'm still a little uncertain on what's the best solution. Another thing that, you know, the budget subcommittee had mentioned at different times, and I think Member Wright mentioned it earlier in our discussion, is, you know, looking at minimum, you know, asking to, you know, control the spending. You know, I can't remember exactly how the budget subcommittee, but looking at the money that gets allocated and not spent, and asking, you know, for, you know, some, you know, accountability or, you know, a sort of, you know, guarantee that it won't suddenly be spent until, you know, the community has a chance to weigh what is the proper level of spending. So I defer to the budget subcommittee people on what's the way that they had come up with. But I do think that those are two things that have been bandied about. How do we deal with mental health and trying to demilitarize that and come up with a viable, resilient plan? And B, how do we make sure that we're putting a brake on the budget? And if we can build momentum for beyond a brake on the budget, you know, to build from there.
All right, thank you so much. Any other members? Member Newton, go ahead, please.
I just, is there any way we can stop the police department from hiring more cops and set aside whatever money that we really don't know what they have for some sort of, somebody figures out what sort of mental health unit will be. I mean, it would be a shame. Like Member Down says, you know, we've finally figured out and the money's been taken already. And they're buying new cars and bulletproof vests or something. Who has the power to tell the chief not to spend any more money?
The problem with the budget is that it's approved, I think 3 years out in advance, 3 years
Right.
out, which creates a problem because we don't know what our taxes is going to be 3 years out. And what they're doing is you create a budget and then you tax towards it. It's kind of a backhand way of doing things. So, and the other thing that I found out in the research is that the police department has never met their hiring to the budget that they asked for. So there's always a cushion of funds left over. And so when I talk about, pulling your hand out of the lion's mouth, I'm saying there's money there already allotted for this, for us to get our crisis responder. We just have to get it into there. The problem that we may find, which I think that, Member Hamady I needed support and in going through this, though we may have to challenge is, if the money is under the police department, does that mean that that person then works for the police department? So that's a whole nother conversation, but the funding is there. It's now a matter of us moving it into and getting the staff we need. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think that if we approach it in a way where we're looking at something, a foundation now, our report, we're not reporting to the council. We're not reporting to the police chief. We're reporting to the community. When we put this out there, even if it fails, quote unquote, the community will know that we have done the research, we have presented it. And so from the win I see coming on the pipeline is, remember, Alameda says that there's 5 people, if I believe, coming up for election. If those 5 people vote no, the community will know what they voted against. And so that's the win that's coming on the line. So it's not an immediate, all of a sudden, this thing's going to happen. It's about what we can get in the short term and long term.
All right. Anyone else? Looks like we only have a total of 5 things. Any other priorities on the list? And if there's something from the document that the Reimagining group wrote, Member Hamady, if there's something that you want to add to that list, again, we're just asking for these to be a part of the foundation. It's like we have seven things.
I guess I don't understand how, so we're starting over and we're just gonna send them like a list of like some things we like, just general. It doesn't sound at all binding, or I know it's not binding, they still have to vote on it, but I think we disagree on what is a win, and just getting council to say like that we put something forward and they passed it, that doesn't necessarily count as a win in my book. So I'm all for like a wish list, but like I don't know how that gets from here are some general things that we're in favor of to like, and then we give that to them and they're like, okay, those are cool things. I'm not following this move from like, we provide them with a resolution is specific in directing, either forces them to say, yeah, we're on board with this, versus just like, a wish list or, so I don't really, I'm sort of thrown for a loop as to.
So think about what you're saying. So basically we're not starting over. We can put this into a resolution. That's why I'm asking, what are the priorities? So we can kind of word it in a way that as part of the tasks that the subcommittee will do would be 1, hold on. audit and monitor, investigations too. We will put all those things in the resolution for it to be passed. Of course, we have to write a memo. So if that's taking you back to where like, oh, we're starting from the beginning, we're not. Basically, we're putting what you put on the document in December, kind of scaling back and just focusing on some of the top priorities. And like I said, some of those items that you utilize, we can use that as part of an ask too. But I think the way it was presented as a whole, it brought a lot of confusion and a lot of just, pushback on where are we going, right? What is the task force actually trying to accomplish? And I understand people are saying wins. It's not just, oh, we won because we passed something, but if you have enough information and meat in there for the resolution to be robust and to be thoughtful in the approach that this is a partnership, like Member Wright said. We're establishing trust. We have to have that trust between the community and the police department and and the subcommittee in order for this to be, beneficial for our city. So don't look at it like, oh, we're starting all over. No, we're just adding to and asking that these things be put, want to draft it in a resolution and extract some of the things and incorporate. We definitely could do that and present it.
So, can I just add something here?
Go ahead.
If we ask for budget transparency, then not all of us sitting here would be able to get the budget, the city budget, and know exactly what's in it, which means that the budget should have narratives. It should have my apologies, I don't want to speak down to anyone, but Excel spreadsheets are beautiful, but they're just a bunch of numbers. Anyone can create them. But when you start putting narrative next to it, and say, for instance, 2021, we asked for 27 police officers, but we only hired 24. 2022, we asked for 31, but we only hired 27. The question can come to us like, why are we asking for so much money? And the next question is, what is the proper citizen to ratio of police officers that the city needs? And once we can answer those questions, we can then turn back and says, okay, so we're asking for something because someone's ego, this is my words, nobody else's words, is built on, oh, I went to Albany and I grew the police department by X. That's not the point. The point is, how do we serve the community? And I think that's what the Reimagine group is looking at. That's when the money comes through and we can get what we want. If we can identify that the money that they're asking for is not needed, then with the money is already allotted and is there for us to get our crisis person in. So it's not starting over. It's how do we eat a goat? One bite at a time. I think we can get this thing, but we have to make sure we package it in a way where it's acceptable. And if we have people who have an aversion to our presentation, we have to not sell our souls, but package it in a way that we can win something,
So, Member Oliver, did you want to, your hand is up.
Yeah, I would just love to add on, which is kind of going off of what Member Hamady was saying. It does feel, maybe I'm misinterpreting the situation, that our Reimagining Public Safety proposal is getting kind of sidelined, or maybe because of like the nature of the things that we were asking for, and because maybe we don't think it's going to pass, that we're just moving on and trying to do something else that will pass. And so I think, given that we, as the Reimagining Public Safety Committee, we were tasked with doing research and coming up with a proposal as far as best practices in our recommendation for reimagining public safety. And that is what we worked on, and that is what we presented. And I think it's only fair that we have a vote on our proposal. And if the proposal doesn't pass this task force, then that is what it is. But I think I don't understand why, after all the months of work on it, we should just sideline it in the name of having 10 basic principles.
which maybe if it doesn't pass, that's kind of a conversation we have to have. But it feels as though this, because of the nature of what we proposed, maybe makes some people uncomfortable that we're not even having the conversation. So I guess I would just like to request that we can have an explicit conversation on the thing we proposed, or we can vote on it. But I think it needs to be discussed explicitly because, Corey and member Hannity especially have put in a lot of labor into this proposal. And I think it's only fair that we give this proposal a vote.
Okay, thank you so much, Member Oliver. Anyone else regarding Member Oliver's comment and requests? And just note that, again, we're not, in my eyes, I don't feel that we're sidelining it. I think we're just adding some, I guess, different language in order to get it passed. But if you want us to vote on the proposal that was presented, then we'll go ahead and take a vote. Do I get a motion from someone?
Member Hannity has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Member Hannity.
I just wanted to say, it is kind of easy to lose sight because I know the first version we presented was like 15 pages long and had like every single thing on there. The most recent version isn't super complicated. It's let's see, it's 12 items, and only a couple of them have multiple subheadings. But I mean, I guess my preference would still be, we haven't gotten, Council Member Gary has referenced some pushback from community members, but I don't know what it is about this document. Within our own task force, the dispatch has proven a thorny issue, but I just don't want, because we just keep repeating it, to just assume that actually, what we've proposed is far too complex and detailed. It's through your input, as a subcommittee, we brought something that was overly dense and detailed, and thanks to everyone's input, I'm pleased with what we have in front of you. So that would
want to bring it. Do you want to pull it up, or has everyone had a chance to look at it during our break? No, Member Johns haven't. Anyone else?
I'd like to see it again.
Okay, if you can pull it up, Member Hannity, and just go through the 12 items and respectively, so we'll give it that option for everyone to review. And if we come up to a consensus, we'll go ahead and present it.
Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Yes, we are. Go ahead. I'll let you go ahead and present, Member Hammond.
So again, it all starts with the creation of the Public Safety Department, and most importantly, within that department, a crisis response team a la Bonita House that would specialize in handling housing, mental and behavioral health emergencies. So for example, Member Wright, if there is a report of someone dealing drugs, I'm not sure, it doesn't, I don't believe that the Bonita House would, or the crisis response team would respond to something like that is purely criminal behavior. As we discussed in our previous meetings, we're leaving some of the specific criteria. We realized that it would not be possible in such a short document to lay out exactly when the crisis response team would respond and when police would. So that would be achieved through implementation. So voting yes on this doesn't tie us to particular criteria or to when the crisis response team would respond versus police. This is simply saying that there would be some scenarios to be determined in which the police would not be called, and instead the crisis response team would be responsible. And we would achieve that through a 911 call center that is staffed by clinical experts who would then funnel the call either to the police department or the public safety department. traffic and parking enforcement would be moved out of police unless there are where there is no evidence of immediate danger to the public. And then, so I'd say that's sort of the core. If we wanted to really, those would be the core four. But beyond that, talked about making sure that when police are doing neighborhood educational presentations, they don't have guns. Repealing laws that criminalize homelessness. Again, that's one that we don't have anywhere close to the authority to, that would require a whole nother thing. So we wanted to cut that for now and move that to later, or keep that as a principle. We talked, I think Member Newton was talking about how to affect the chief of police. How do we decide keep the chief of police from spending money without approval? So this would remove the chief of police's discretion to create and implement programming without approval, require submission of proposals to the city council for public comment, and directly elicit recommendations from the SEJC. So we do add prohibiting subscription to Lexipol, which is the one-size-fits-all policing, request that Albany Unified School District end programs to bring police officers into the school. And then we have some bits here about removing discretion on behalf of the police department to implement technology without approval, removing the SWAT unit, and then we have the accountability piece of it. So as I go through this, I mean, yeah, if that is, I'd say, the two, maybe for simplicity's sake, we could vote on just the first four, because that's really, if people are uncomfortable with the breadth of the thing, I think the first four are sort of the key components, which is everything flows from when police get involved, when they get brought into the equation. So if it's a given that police are always going to be on the scene, regardless of the need for them, then I think that's where we have the disagreement. So if everyone just wanted to look at 1 through 4, I don't know, Amelia, does that sound okay to you? I mean, I'm okay. We could also vote on the entirety of it, but it does get into, since everyone seems to be concerned about, trying to do everything at once, if you just look at those first 4, they're fundamental, but they're specific.
Yeah, if I could jump in, I think, Member Hammond, if you could scroll down a bit, I just kind of offer a slightly different perspective. I do think that the second half of the document is equally important to our task of reimagining public safety, such as kind of the pieces on programming, on reinvesting in the community, ending criminalization of poverty, technology, demilitarizing, accountability. Like, I think that those are, people are kind of saying that we're trying to do too much, but that was our task. Our task was reimagining public safety. And I think that the proposal as a whole is important in having a comprehensive view, because it's not, obviously the foundation of having a public safety department, as opposed to just a police department, is kind of one foundational structure. But I do think that the number 11 and 12 also make up really important parts of the document. And I think, at least for me, a win means presenting something that we're proud of. And I think, to me, in order for me to be proud of this, we have to have the whole picture.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly,
looking at the document, I think it's the wording that I think is troubling. It triggers something that is not necessarily, let me rephrase this. The wording allows one to create their own meaning. Invest in the community, the current proposal police budget for 2022 should be reduced by an amount of 50% or greater, and the funding of a community program to non-police assistance agency, blah, blah, blah. The only thing someone is going to pick up from that is oh, their budget should be reduced by 50%. What I'm saying to you is that what their budget is, they're not spending. Rather than say it should be reduced by 50%, you say historically you haven't spent 30% of the money you're asking for. That money goes towards this program. You're not telling them to cut anything. Anytime you tell someone to cut something, they're going to get upset. So rather than go into a fight, you go into a partnership. It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing you're saying. I read the other day where their police officers, police agencies are not giving tickets to people. They're sending them by mail. So there's nobody pulling anyone over. If you need to get a ticket because your tag is expired, you get it in the mail. There are certain things we can do. So I don't think that this is, I think this is part of what we're trying to get documented in a condensed bullet point. I think when people see the words, they put their own twist to it, their own language. That's my interpretation. I could be wrong, but I don't disagree with what you're asking. From the budgetary point, I'm saying the money's there. You know, it's now, do you want to, how do you get the police chief to give up the budget, or how do you get the council to say to the police chief, you're not spending your money, use it over here? How do we get that? How do we get from here to there? And it's not taken away from that. It's rephrasing it, I think. My opinion. I'm not on the committee, and so I wouldn't. I know what the work we put in, and I understand the work you put in. So we're both in the same situation. So I get the importance that we have towards it.
Yeah, and there's substantial overlap there with the budget subcommittee. And since that specifically is your subcommittee, that might be a piece that, isn't really within our, obviously they're related, but we can't send to council. I think y'all called for reducing the budget by police budget by a minimum of 25%, if I remember correctly. So it would be odd for us to also ask them to pass something that demands 50% reduction. So I'd be okay with saying that wasn't our mandate specifically. And I think at this point, so it's just me, Amelia, and Councilmember Gary, but speaking for myself, if we removed number 11 and allowed both through the budget subcommittee and just the council to determine exactly how these things would play out, but here we would be saying, here's what needs to happen, and in conjunction with the budget subcommittee, y'all can decide exactly where the funds are going to go.
But it goes back up to the other, if you scroll up where you talk about the crisis responder, we need to be able to fund that. And if you look at the big picture, the council is going to say the city doesn't have the budget, and we're saying the money is there. You're just not looking in the right pot. So if the question that we need to ask is, what is the trigger point that would make this non-starter for someone, and how we can, what I hear is the call center. So if we remove the call center out for a later date down the line, how would you be comfortable with that?
Well, my personal feeling is that it doesn't, so a lot of the savings, in order to get any of this done, it comes from reducing police function and reducing police budget. So even like the answer to how do you afford the crisis response team is you're going to have a smaller police department handling, with the crisis response team would be taking, a good chunk of the duties that they do, the parking enforcement, would be, so we would have a need for fewer officers, which would then reduce the budget. But we're not telling them exactly how to lay that out right now, because it's getting ahead of ourselves. But as far as, so again, it's not just something I'm very attached to because I started with it. I do think fundamentally everything flows from that. When the call comes in, who are we sending out? And if we're sending out the police all the time, or we're sending out the police and then the police get to decide whether the police are needed or not, I just don't see that as reimagining policing. And I think we end up, with more of the status quo.
So if we keep the call center in, we have to get training for them to be able to determine how to best allocate the police and the crisis center resources. So that becomes a training issue. It comes back to where's the funds coming from. And I'm saying to you, the fund's gonna come. We're on the same page regarding the funding, by the way, that the fund has to come. We are not here to add any more expense to the city budget. We're here to make sure that whatever they allocate to community well-being, and this is my phrase, not your phrase, X amount of dollars is being allotted to community well-being. Some of it's going to spend on, for my choice of words here is criminal activity and enforcing the rule of law. And another piece is going to be spent on community welfare and public safety.
All right, so I'm going to jump. Hold on one second. John had his hand up for a while, so let's get some input from that member. Go ahead, Member John.
Thanks. I think there is some confusion about wording. What I hear in this conversation is cutting the police budget as opposed to reallocating the police budget or reprioritizing the police budget. The general drift of this document, I agree with, but I don't agree with forcing the council to make a choice that they can't make right now. To call the police department a public safety department or to create a public safety department, and that would consist solely of unarmed personnel, that doesn't seem realistic to me. What seems realistic to me is changing the police department, that name, to a public safety department, but not deciding that they're going to be solely unarmed. That seems like a bridge too far to me. So if we want to do something, if we want to present something that is doable and reasonable, a reasonable ask, then I would suggest that we change some of the language wherever it is appropriate or available to stress a rethinking, a reallocating, a reprioritizing, as opposed to a cutting and replacing. That seems to me like it's less likely to engender a negative response.
I just want to jump in and say, so San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, they're all creating public safety departments unarmed. So this isn't, we're not the only ones. We're actually, lagging behind a bit our compared to our neighbors. And then just, it does sound like we have a fundamental disagreement. I don't want to do something just because I think, they'll like it. So if realistic is also inadequate, then I'm not for realistic. So I would not, it's good to get it out there. Is it a matter of wording or is it really a fundamental difference about because yes, I was not, this is not a police reform document. It is a reimagining police document. But no, I can send everyone, I thought maybe, you know, I mean, I think it's in the citations, but maybe not. But San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland, they're all doing variations of this. I'm not sure if the independent dispatch, I'd have to look at, that's something that everyone is struggling with. But as far as creating a crisis response team that is unarmed and separate from the police department, that is, it was proven realistic in other cities that have adopted it. So,
is it a document itself, or is it the people that are now in office who don't have any faith in the community, which is us? Because that is something that we need to answer. If the document, what you're asking, like I said before, I've seen this before, I've read it about how different departments accept these changes. But if the people in the office currently don't believe it, we're never going to get it passed and it's just going to die. How do we get something that we want in for some future wins without compromising? And that is something that you have to look at and ask. I know we did the work. The person with the power did not do the work. I'm making an assumption here that we're asking them, if we're going to form a public safety department, we're not asking for more money from them, from the city. So the budgetary side of it is fine. We're not asking for more money, less money for policing, and that's fine because the money is already budgeted. It's just not being used. So it's an understanding of how do we get the people in power to understand what we're trying to do.
Can I say something here?
Yes, sir.
You know, I support the goals in this document. I think the goals fit with my values, but I don't think that the council, the current makeup of the council, can reimagine policing in the way that you do. I would rather present to them things that they cannot veto or vote against first, then undertake a public education campaign, and then ask for more of exactly what you want in the way that you want it. But I don't, you know, some of the things that you said about other cities having public safety departments, like, I did not know that. So that to me is something that I should have known, but I didn't. And I would assume that there are many other people in the community who don't know that, who don't fully appreciate what that means, who upon finding that it does exist in other cities and that it hasn't put those cities at risk, that would give them a reason to support the position. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Is there anyone else who'll go ahead and remember? Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, a couple of things that, you know, jump out at me and that, you know, continue to worry me is the making sure, I think what we want to present, we want to make sure that it's closely tailored to what is in place here in Albany. So, you know, the parking in Albany is handled by, I believe unarmed, but the separate parking enforcement people. What do we actually gain? So in a context of a city, you know, what do we actually gain if we move those people into under a different form of supervision? In other words, are we making sure that our plan here is tied to what already takes place in Albany, as opposed to, what we might see as a generic, problem in some jurisdictions? Similarly, I would like to know, what we know about, there's a reference to SWAT force in Albany. What do we know about that? The training manuals all talk about dealing with external SWAT forces. What actually do we know? Is there a paramilitary unit in Albany? In other words, we don't want to put ourselves where we're sort of making claims, about things that have to be fixed. And then it turns out that our claims aren't rooted in what's going on here, but instead in a kind of abstract notion of what we'd like more generally for policing around the country. So those are a couple places where, in reading it, I feel like, is this actually written for Albany? Not because I think Albany's perfect or even necessarily good, but is it written toward the specific, but toward addressing the specific problems that we see, where parking is enforced generally not by police officers, but by the parking enforcement staff. And where I would like to know more about, our certain knowledge of what the situation is in terms of whether there is a paramilitary SWAT unit in the Albany department. I mean, I was told when they interview that if people talk about their desire to be on SWAT teams, they refer them to other departments. That may not literally be true, but I would like to know what we know to be true before we assert that those are the particular problems, because I don't want to take the eye off what I think I and others, would agree are significant things to figure out: how to deal with mental health, whether that involves dispatch or other modes, and how to make sure that we're demilitarizing those encounters, as well as the budget question.
Do they have a SWAT team? Does the city of Albany have a SWAT team? They don't, or they do?
So Corey drafted that part. I don't know whether they knew for a fact that there was one, but I do just want to briefly say that Member Downs, I mean, I think those are, we absolutely, we're definitely in favor of tailoring it to the city. So if that means, like, if parking enforcement isn't as big of a problem for us because it's already done by a separate unarmed group, body, then, we can cut that. If we, the sticking point isn't that, or for example, or the SWAT, if Albany doesn't have a SWAT team, then the sticking point isn't, we don't need to remove a team that doesn't exist. So those are things that, I think are easy to remedy, but I get the feeling that there are bigger concerns than that. But if those are the two, I mean, I think those are, we can lop those off right now.
May I throw something into the number 8? If you have someone that was a pedophile and that you never report them to the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security, then that person basically get a free pass. Which means that the person may commit a crime in Albany, but Berkeley will never know about it. Or if we're going to keep it in, it is. I'm going to speak from my industry. I need to know when someone traveled from California to Nevada, from Arizona to California, especially if you live in a state like California that's pretty transient. So that could be very scary if we isolate our information on who has criminal history. So that's something that we may want to look at. I know and I think that the objective here is, where do we strike the balance between the person who wants safety and the person's and someone's rights? So that's something that we may want to look at.
All right, anyone else? So Member Hamady, what you're highlighting is what you're going to extract from this document?
Yeah, I mean, with Amelia's agreement, I think those 3 are not vital. And if we can get enough support from the broader group without them, then be fine by me.
Okay,
I agree with definitely the number 9 and the parking. I agree, and I appreciate Member Downs your checking in on those points.
Is there anything else you want to extract from this document or add to, and then we'll take it to a vote? Before we do that, we do have one public comment. I'll go ahead and let him in for 3 minutes.
Thanks. Hi, it's Jeremiah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just got off the phone with Albany Dispatch. Yes, Albany does have a SWAT team. By the way, I just spoke to Albany Dispatch. Just got off the phone to Erica. Albany does have a SWAT team. The details on how many people, how many officers, or anything like that. But Albany does have a SWAT team. And the last thing I just want to say, thank you for allowing me to speak. I just had this idea. I know we've talked about Kensington. So I think we have to add in the population of Kensington as well and combine both cities' populations and find out the ratio to the population, officer ratio to the public, or maybe even dispatchers ratio to the public, how many calls. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your comment. Looks like there's no other comments. So I'll bring it back to the members. Is there any way we can, Member Hamady and Member Oliver, make a statement of priorities based on some of the things that the members has already suggested off of the elements? I think we had 7. Can we put that somewhere along in this document?
I mean, yeah, we could certainly add a list of priorities, but I mean, I'm not sure how it would work with the existing. I mean, how so there'd be a list of priorities, and then simultaneous with that, there'd be these directives. Just not.
Let's scroll down.
Summarizing it, like what are the priorities as evidenced by this document? Something more digestible.
And can you scroll up to the top of the document?
Like the very beginning, or the discussion?
Create a comment. This one is fine. I mean, out of those 7 things that were listed as a priority, do you feel that the items on this document could be meshed into one document? I mean, bringing them all together? Is that a possibility, or are you saying no? You just want it to go as is?
Well, I'm definitely not. I mean, I'm not against. If we're just adding, I thought we wanted to, you know, not add any more to it, but all those all sounded like good things. I mean, but some of it sounded more like oversight than reimagining. But I don't care.
Whatever the group wants to do. Anyone else? If you want to go ahead and make a motion to vote, if everyone's in agreement with what has been extracted, is there anything else that needs to be extracted? All right, do we have a motion?
I'll motion that we put it to a vote.
We get a second?
Second.
right, Ann.
Just making sure I have it correct. So I have member Hamady moved and member Oliver seconded.
That's correct.
Okay, member Downs.
I'm sorry, I had to step out for a second, so I actually missed the motion.
Member Hamady, would you like to restate the motion?
Sure. So I'm motioning that we vote on this document with number 4, the highlighted portion. So traffic and parking enforcement, technology, and demilitarized APD. All those highlighted portions would be removed. Otherwise, the document would be as is.
I still prefer, more of a different a way of trying to get people together to figure out some of the solutions. So I think this does do a good job of identifying the problems, but I'm not as confident on the solutions. So I'd rather take up the priorities. But if we have to vote on this as it is, I'm going to vote no.
Okay, member Gary.
Abstain.
Member Hamady.
Yes.
Member Johns.
No.
Member Locke.
No.
Member Newton.
No.
Member Oliver.
Yes.
And member Wright.
Yes.
I think the motion failed.
Can we have another conversation about this, please? This is important for me. If Albany has a SWAT team, they're very expensive. What is the issue that is troubling council person Gary that you're aware of?
As far as, what are you referring to?
This document.
Can you pull it back up, please? So it's not so much that is troubling me. I just think that we're putting out too much without any room for, again, I don't see partnership. It's just basically, these are the things that we want, and you want council to vote on this and say yes or no, this is what we're going to agree to. So I don't have confidence that this will pass the way it is written. I'm not saying that we should soften it up in any sense, but I just don't see the partnership, or at least if we can pull back. I mean, from the beginning, I've been asking, can we just put the top priorities there and then add to it? And you guys have been stating the exact same thing. So, presenting a document just because of the fact that we want to call people out on the carpet, that's troubling to me. At the end of the day, we've spent months working on this, and nothing.
That's totally unfair, and that's total. This isn't about calling people out. If you have council members who are
out of respect. Now, I've let you talk, and that seems to be a pattern. I'm not trying to say anything. He asked me to say what I thought, and I'm just giving my perspective. I'm not trying to call anyone else out, and I'm not saying anything against you. I'm just saying from my perspective, that is what I feel at this moment. That's all I'm saying. And so if the consensus of the group wants to push this forward, by all means, let's push it forward.
if so, what I hear initially at the first part of the conversation was that if we can collapse some of this stuff into one heading, if we can get if we can somehow get some of this to fit into what we talked about.
Get it into a reasonable model. You got half of the members on here that are saying no.
All right.
So
right.
this is not me just saying, you know, I abstain, because either way, I have to vote on when it comes to council. So I'm just asking that if we want to be reasonable in the amount, and again, Member Hamady, it is no disrespect to you. I was not trying to say anything against you. I'm just giving you my perspective on what I feel that would go through and would not. And let me ask you all this. How many of you have spoken with city council members and asked them without breaking the Brown Act? What would you like to see? How can I get your buy-in, or whatever the case may be? If you're not speaking to the people that are going to make the decisions, and we think we're going to just bring something to them, I'm just saying, if we want a partnership, everybody needs to be at the table in some aspect, not basically trading information and telling other council members the way other council members are going to vote, but at least getting some perspective from the council members. That's all I'm saying. You all had a chance to meet with the chief. You spoke with the police association. You spoke with them. So out of that information, in collaboration, I think, again, we should be still trying to formulate a partnership. And that's just my thoughts.
So one of the things I think is happening here that and I'm going to speak for myself is politics colliding with citizenship. Okay, that's it. Politics means whose hand we shake when, and what do we get now, and what investment we made for the future. And I believe that the primary thing here that drives all of this is budgetary transparency. With that, we can find money to retrain the dispatchers to do what we want them to do, which means that they can then split the calls. And that is something that I think the police department may buy into. Okay, we're not taking this away from you. We're asking you to retrain, and we win, they win. Or if you look at it the other side, both party feels a little bit of pain. The years ago, I worked for Lockheed Martin, and we were involved in the removing the parking citation people from under the police force in San Francisco. And different city, but someone asked the impact of it. It results in greater violence against parking people, you know, but that's the psychology of another city. I believe that we can ask the questions, do we need our own SWAT team, or do we contract out a SWAT team? How often did the SWAT team get used? What is the investment? What is our return on our investment? What is the city return on the taxpayers' money that they're putting into a program? And the SWAT team is if we're paying for a SWAT team that we only use once a year, that's crazy. If we're paying a SWAT team and we're going to use them because we have one, that is also crazy. So I think budgetary transparency is key. The only trouble I see with that is getting the council to change. Maybe it's a city ordinance, city law that says that they have to set the budget 3 years in advance. Staffing for the population would then also bring budget in line so that we can better understand the police budget and better be able to use some of that money for crisis dispatching. I think we can achieve most of what we have on that sheet without us going into the details of it. And if we have to get the extra 5 people, what we'll do is form a political organization. Hopefully the citizen will form a political organization and vote people in that will get us where we need to get as a community. But as it stands right now, you have to get the people who are in power to get us to the first base. So I think if we want to look at budgetary transparency, and also talk about public information transparency, those are two things that we can get. One of them is actually just formality, our process, and one of them is actually budgetary, and the budget will drive all the other things that we're asking for in this.
I think, I'm sorry, are you done, Member Wright?
I'm done, yes.
Okay. I think that's right on the right track. And I do think that we could agree. I mean, my wariness is with the certainty the document has about solution, not with the goals and priorities. And so I think, budgetary transparency, as Member Wright said, would be a priority. I would certainly endorse, the information that Member Newton, said and Member Wright said. I do think that a third, and that is really important to have as a priority, is a reassessment and a planning of the best way to de-escalate, demilitarize mental health calls in a way that is, viable, that is safe for all involved, and, that is going to be resilient in the face of incidents that don't go exactly as, that in the face of that. And to me, that's also really important. I don't want to lose that from the document, even if I'm not certain that the document solution is the only way to accomplish it. And so I would absolutely support, and like I say, one solution I would suggest is get the SEJC, get, local people, they're members of the SEJC who've been, decades of experience in social work, and get them sitting down with police department, with, anyone, with council members, and to really assess the details of what's been, done, what's, exists right now in other cities as, goals and ideals, what exists in other cities as things that are in place, what are the organizations we could partner with, do we have to make a new organization ourselves, or can we contract out with an existing one? And to say this is a problem I believe we need to solve, I would like to have more confidence that we pick the right solution, because if we pick the wrong one, it'll discredit the whole process. So I would say that's definitely a third.
Anyone else? Member Hamady, are you willing to bring up the document and make changes, and we vote on it again?
I don't even understand what.
I think right and
start a new document. Y'all want some priorities with the statement of principles. I don't even know what talking about partnership. The whole point was we put together something for their approval, not we come to them with some ideas and ask them their thoughts and then they come back to us. That was never the arrangement. But yeah, no, y'all are welcome to start your own thing, but you're not just going to layer a bunch of priorities on top of this, then delete it and call it the Reimagining Police document. That ain't what it is.
No, we don't want it to change anything. And we're asking you to, the idea, the people in power is not going to give us what we want. How do we get what we want? And sometimes it's you go out and you fight, and we get no. I think we're getting a heads up that this is going to come down as a no, and you're saying that okay, you're okay with a no.
Yeah, and I'm not okay with it now. If we spend this time, I want to hear a yes, and we have to make it where it's a yes. Go ahead, Member Oliver.
Yeah, I mean, I think, ultimately my understanding is that, reimagining public safety, I want to reiterate that it was reimagining public safety, not reimagining policing. So the whole idea was that we were tasked with reimagining the whole sphere of public safety. And, you know, this is kind of the set of principles that we came up with, which involved creating a public safety department and, you know, police would potentially be a subset of that. And because of that, there would be a significant decrease in the police budget, and there would be an investment in other resources, including community response teams and other affirming social services. Like, our analysis was grounded in the assumption that policing is inherently racist, inherently violent, and we are divesting from it. That was our framework. Our framework was explicitly divesting from policing. It was not in partnership with police. It was not in partnership with the city council. It was, you know, we're just civilians and we're sharing our opinion. Because my understanding is that's the whole point of a community task force, is that we as community members are sharing our opinion. So this was what our section of the community came up with. I'm in no way, and I don't think Member Hamady either, is in any way trying to be difficult, or like, I'm 100% open to continuing to talk about other forms of reimagining public safety, but grounding our analysis is an assumption of divesting from the police. So if that's like a foundational difference within the task force, and that means that we get a no, then that's just kind of how the numbers shake out. So I guess I just want to, I don't know if like explain is the right word, but that's kind of where I'm coming from personally, at least, is that, you know, I am not willing to support a document that is supporting the police. So, you know, this is, you know, we're community members volunteering our time. We're supposed to share our opinion with the city council or with whoever. This is what our opinion is. And if I don't think it's fair that we should be asked to negotiate with the city council, because the city council is supposed to be hearing from us. And we're sharing our opinion. And this is what it is. And maybe it's not even really an agreement within the task force, but this is what our subcommittee, this is our vision for reimagining public safety.
So, Anne, let me ask you, what were the numbers for the vote?
It was 4-3 with one abstention.
Yes, 4-3.
I also just want to point out, I met with the chief of police. He put me in touch with Bonita House. He was very helpful. And no, my disappointment, this is disheartening, not with the city, but this body itself. But I think it is a good sign. If we can't even get it to pass here, then yeah, I mean, I think you can. And, you know, I had obviously been counting on Councilmember Gary's vote. So if you can't get that, then I think it's time to go back to the drawing board. But yeah, I completely agree. I think we can couch it however we want, but I think really what we have is a fundamental disagreement about policing. I don't think we could get a majority of people on this call to agree that policing is inherently racist. And, you know, so if we don't see eye to eye on that, then I think, you know, maybe we can just, I mean, I don't know that we have the makeup for anything that I could support.
So even if we have 4-4, you still need someone to tie. If we go in and revote and members are still for, so that's just how it's going to land. Is there anything, and I'll ask this question one more time and we can go to another vote. Is there any language that will make Member Newton, Member Jones, anything in there that you see that is just not there and that's got you where you will not change your vote that we can add and that you would be willing to add, Member Hammond? Member Newton? Go ahead.
I think that the differences are too great between Member Hamady and Oliver and the way I feel about it. I understand that they feel that they're giving up too much and I sympathize with them and understand, but I'm not going to vote for it. And I don't see how it can be changed. I mean, they'd be cutting up, you know, what they've been working on for so long. It wouldn't make sense. No, I can't change my vote.
Okay. Member Jones?
I could change my vote, but I have to see the document again, please.
Let me know if you'd like me to scroll.
Okay, yes, that's good. Stop, please. Okay, you can scroll, please. Okay, stop. Okay, scroll, please. Stop.
So I have a quick question, Member Hamity, on the accountability on the MOUs. Did the association state that we could interject or council could interject and implement that based on their rules? Is that feasible? Because I don't think so.
I don't know. I imagine, you know, the city could ask, and that's what we'd be asking the city to do. But I don't think there's any, it's not, they can't just unilaterally renegotiate. So yeah, if that's a sticking point, we can remove that too.
I think if you want to, if we can move the campaigning, I mean, I don't believe that can't prevent candidates from city council for second funds from police union. I mean, as far as I know, I don't believe the police gave funds, but I don't know. So I just know for myself that that wasn't the case. So I don't know about any other members that are running, but I think the MOU, that's going to be that's going to be hard with negotiations. And I think if you remove that, I mean, and I think as far as the campaigning, if someone is running for office and they accept funds, all of that is public record. So then that gives the voter the option of saying, you know, I'm not going to support them because, you know, XYZ, the police is funding them. So I don't necessarily think that should be there. But again, that's just my take on it. I think Member John is trying to get back on. He's having trouble.
Yeah. So the one on this where we are now that I have questions about is D3, and I would just want to know the viability of 10D3 in terms of prevent from reviewing footage of an incident before completing initial reports, statements, or interviews. What kind, I mean, to me, the crucial piece is what kind of incident, as if it's written that they could never look at a tape before any report they're writing up, then I'd want to know, you know, if we're talking about an incident that involves a sort of officer involved shooting or something, absolutely. If we're talking about that they could never look at footage as they write up a report, I'd want to know more about where that's coming from and what could be some of the unexpected outcomes of it. But yes, clearly officer involved shooting, that's an easy support with the change just made. And then
Can you scroll up to line number 11?
I think you meant, yeah, you go. This would be where Member Wright might want to had some suggestions about how to put this in line with the budget subcommittee.
The problem I have here is, okay, sorry. Problem we have is the budget is already approved. It should be that that the budget should be approved no more than 24 months out. I think we're doing 36 months out, you know, a year-over-year budget. Because right now you can it's almost impossible for you to make changes. The current proposal, police budget, community. I'd say should be reduced by 25%. Or let me rephrase this. The current police budget should involve staffing for our crisis, at least one crisis counselor. That's what we need to put in there. Technically, that would reduce your budget, the actual armed police officer. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say? The only problem that we have, I have with this committee may have with my statement is that who does that person report to? Am I correct? It wouldn't be part of your reimagining. It wouldn't be reimagining the police, reimagining police, public safety. Correct?
Right. They would be separate, but I mean, I think. Remind me that I am correct, right? That the budget subcommittee proposed 25% minimum reduction.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's okay to leave it without specifying exactly how the number of counselors,
Okay. Okay.
Okay. On number 12, you know, it really, I guess this circles back to the beginning of whether we have, you know, one commission that was created, you know, that'll start meeting, hopefully assuming it's posted in, you know, April or May. Are we going to ask to create a second commission? And I guess it goes to how much we see ourselves here as looking to create a fully separate part of the bureaucracy of the city, you know, and that may go back to what Member Hamady and Member Oliver talked about as sort of divergent paths. To me, I would say that we would want to, you know, charge the commission that we've already gotten appointed to, you know, to do this. I understand the workaround of the SEJC, but given that they're appointed by council, the more that the difference in having it appointed by SEJC versus council would get thinner, given that council would choose SEJC people in order to pick people who would pick people they wanted of the type that they wanted on this committee. So I'm not sure that workaround in the long run even accomplishes as much as it might appear. And I'm not sure that the double committee structure actually will make it better than seeing these as things that we're charging the committee that's been approved to do. So 12 would be a piece that I would change.
Member Downs, are you suggesting that it would simply be this task force would continue these duties? Who are you proposing would be in charge of implementation?
So you could add it to the responsibilities of the commission that council created based on our recommendation, but with their revisions.
The oversight.
In other words, as part of the charge of that.
Okay.
That this document.
You end up calling the commission that was formed under.
It got changed, so I can by council. So I'm going to get the name, not intentionally. There's a chance I'm going to get the name wrong.
I'm sorry, I need to interject and do a time check. It is almost 10 o'clock, and on the agenda, it's a general policy that the task force will now begin discussion or consideration of an agenda item after 9, so we're an hour past already.
Okay.
It needs to have a motion to continue, or it actually needs to wrap up.
Okay, so let's do a motion to continue. It's 10 o'clock. Member Hamady and other members, will 10:30 work? Can we get this finalized and approved and a vote before 10:30?
I hope so.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, can I get a second?
Second.
All right, can we get a roll call?
Member Downs?
Yes.
Member Gary?
Yes.
Member Hamady?
Yes.
Member Jones?
Yes.
Member Locke?
Yes.
Member Newton?
Yes.
Member Oliver?
Yes.
And Member Wright?
Yes.
And this also means that the next item would have to be postponed to next.
That's fine. I think we're kind of interjecting that item in as well, but that's fine. Thank you so much. All right, if you want to go ahead and finish the edits, take a vote.
If we don't have the exact name yet, we can, as a placeholder by the Oversight Commission.
Yeah, that the oversight, we had a name that was closer to this. I think public safety is what we suggested. Council changed it. I don't want to give the wrong name. But the Oversight Commission created by council, so that there was a lot of pushback against having one additional new committee. Okay. And I think if we can, it will simplify the request if we're clarifying and expanding the purview of that rather than asking for another one, because there was worries of staff.
Anyone want me to scroll back up, or?
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Really quick.
Member Hamady, I'm not sure if from where we see it's not moving.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know. Where do you want me to?
No, so just to be clear, the items that are highlighted, those are the items that you're going to remove?
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else have anything they would like to add, or?
I mean, the question I come back to is really the top three, which is, creating a separate bureaucracy,
Mm-hmm.
I do like it really 1 and 3, creating a separate bureaucracy, and then stating that we know the way to staff the call center. And I believe that, I do want to have the crisis response team, and I'm very open that, we need to, that the call center, can be an important way, but I'm less certain that I want to say that this is exactly the answer that I would have. So, I mean, to me, I would say crisis response team and, a group. It can be SEJC, it can, but a group to look at implementation of calls. To me, it's less of a threshold that it has to be outside of the department. I just want to see more sort of cost benefit analysis of that. What could go wrong, and what are the ways that we're making sure we're building a system that's going to work. So really 1 and 3 would be the 2 places that.
So we know Oakland and Berkeley are building a public safety department, correct? Okay.
I don't think that's correct. They are working on Berkeley's having trouble putting together an oversight commission that will have broader powers than their current one. They can't seem to get enough people involved, and they're a year behind practically. So I don't know what they're going to do. They're trying, and Oakland too, but they're not very far along.
I think their first steps were voting to reduce the budgets. I forget which city, one reduced by 50%. And then they're still figuring out the specifics of what the alternative to policing will look like.
Yeah, no, it's obviously difficult, complicated. Berkeley has, its own problems, even though they're just over there. It's a different world. But they ran into problems when they wanted to change the duties of police officers and have non-sworn officers enforcing traffic violations. The state doesn't allow that, so they'd have to have the law changed to allow that. I mean, I guess at some level, a sworn officer has to turn on the siren and pull somebody over for running a red light.
I still have a remaining concern with item 1 here, and I just want to make the distinction clear as far as the discussion within this group. The way it's stated currently, we're creating something separate and apart from the police department. And something to consider, and this was my reason for broaching the question with the expert who was invited to the first part of this meeting, was does that, like, what are the potential liabilities of that sort of a system versus incorporating police within that umbrella of public safety? If we're establishing 2 things that are separate and apart from one another, there is just procedural friction and communication barriers that no matter how well integrated these things are between the two. And I just want to make it clear, are we doing the former or the latter? Is this police within this newly established Department of Public Safety or under that? Or is there more of a hard line between the two? So for me, my lingering sticking point is on item 1.
I think that is the issue. Do you create a new department, or which is more bureaucracy, or how you reimagine the police department and who's in charge? Do you still have a chief? Does a chief job get reduced?
For what it's worth, the city of Sunnyvale changed their name from a police department to a public safety department a long time ago. And they still, hassle everybody like every other police department. It's just called different. It has a different name.
Member Johns, is there anything else you wanted to reread or remove?
No, thanks.
Can we go down to, I think it's number 11, the 25%, and I'd like to add 25% and freeze.
Yeah.
I like that generally. The only piece I might say is, do we want to have a 25% and freeze, except for, the calculation of the rate of inflation or something. So that
rate of inflation plus growth, population growth.
Yeah.
One of the problems we all have with police forces is that the leaders have a tendency of wanting to have a bigger department, regardless of the impact on the city budget. Now, all these changes that we made doesn't necessarily reduce the number of things we're asking for.
Are you saying you want to add that there should be a hiring freeze?
A budgetary freeze.
Budgetary freeze?
Yeah. So reduced by 25%. Budgetary freeze.
Isn't that already implied if it's to be reduced by 25% or greater, it can't increase?
Well,
the way it's written, it says 2022, and if I understood member right, I think he was suggesting for the future that this establish a sort of a threshold for the future, that we reset for 2022, and then we stay at that reset with whatever increments member Wright said for inflation and population growth, so that it's not just a one-time drop. But I might be misstating what I thought member Wright was saying.
That is what my intent is.
Well, I'll add, what do you want me to add? I'll add whatever.
You can wordsmith it. Basically, what we're saying is that the 2022 budget is reduced by 25%. Any future growth should be based on population growth and inflation, or any future budget increase. Now, okay. When we start off this conversation, we made a list of 7 things, correct? 7 talking points.
We did.
Can we have those 7 talking points up to see if it matches any of them, or be read? Could it be read to see?
Member Downs, can you go through those, please?
These are the notes I had, which people should feel free to correct. The 7 things that I noted as different areas: to authorize, to audit, monitor, and to receive public complaints; accessibility of information about policing activity, transparency on police reports; budgetary transparency; inclusion of crisis responding team; formulating an approach to mental health, and which I listed separately, but in some ways is part of possibly of the crisis response team; and a break on budget, setting aside excess funds.
Now, can any of those 7 things be fitted into this with the Reimagine group not feeling that their document is watered down? Or can any of the 7 things be interpreted into this?
On the second part of it, I think some of them clearly are there, but at least as I see, that the crisis response team is there. We could include a statement on budgetary transparency, it seems like under number 11, as something to include. I don't think we included something on accessibility of information, but we did include the break on the budget, the set aside funds. I think the approach to mental health is probably implicit between number 2 and number 3. So, I think the things that are missing that are perhaps non-controversial, would be including just forthright statements on budgetary transparency and accessibility of information.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the outstanding issue that we might want to have a separate vote on is on what Member Locke said of, the issue around maybe it's just number 1 or maybe it's number 1 and number 3. Are we creating 2 separate departments or are we creating this within one department, whether renamed or what?
Any other input? On 10:15.
One quick question. So the Reimagine Committee, is it the intent to create a separate department from the police? Or is it to reimagine the police department by doing away with them, creating a separate department, or create another entity to run parallel?
Yeah, so this was it's a separate department, and that's just based on our conversations with Bonita House and the way that the current crisis response team operates, which as I believe the Bonita House representative mentioned today, the city has the authority to enter into a contract with them today if they wanted.
So they would operate independently, and the police officer would operate not independently.
But it would be really important, as she mentioned, that they have a good relationship.
Yes.
So, but yes, they would be no member of the public safety team would be reporting to the chief of police or other police officer.
If I could just jump in, my understanding is that the public safety department would be the most senior department, and that the police could be called upon by the public safety department in certain situations. So there would be a hierarchy of sorts, with the public safety department being the primary, with the police being able to be called upon in circumstances if necessary. That was my understanding. I'm not sure if we're on the same page, Member Hamady.
No, so the public safety department will consist solely of unarmed personnel. We had talked about whether to have them as 2 separate departments, but police department and public safety department with a non-police officer at the head of both, but thought that would be a non-starter politically to have the chief of police have additional person to respond to who's not a police officer. So as it is right now, they are totally separate. The public safety department it's not above the police department. They're just parallel track handling distress calls.
And Councilperson Gary, do you think that would be a no starter for the council?
I can't speak for them.
No, I know you're not speaking for them. You're speaking to us.
So
I'm asking you to speak to us as your opinion.
I understand. I think
I mean, for me, I would want to know more as far as, you know, how much is it going to cost, you know, out of their budget to formulate this separate department? What would the organizational structure look like? You know, putting those elements together, I would and how that's going to work within the city overall organizational structure. So, I mean, for me, that would be the only concerns. But again, I mean, if they're solely there to be on the front line for crisis intervention, I would want that versus, you know, someone coming with an arm. Did you mute me?
Yes. Yes, I heard you. And 25% cut wouldn't do it. If you're building a total different department, wouldn't do it at all.
The 25% cut, you think that it will establish that? Is that what you're saying?
No,
No,
it would not.
Okay. So how much do you think just off of?
You'd have to go back close to the 50%. You know, just on I believe Richmond says that I think 60% of their calls did not require armed police, but those are the facts versus our perception. So if we go down into the 30%, 35%, that may be a place to start.
Well, I think, you know, the scale of the public safety department, how far, you know, budgetary concerns will determine just how transformational this is. We're laying out what the ideal would be. You know, another thing to consider is that I have a feeling that police officers in Albany make more than the workers at a nonprofit crisis response team. And, you know, but that's just speculation. Regardless, this doesn't, you know, perhaps because they are unwilling to reduce the budget by 50%, it means that, you know, the crisis response team they're only staffed 12 hours a day instead of 24 hours a day or something. I mean, you know, there are ways that it could be compromised, but I don't think we have to do that on the front end.
So let us talk about, you know, that's a very, very good point. But if we go down to say 35%, you're talking about that includes removing the police officer, total amount of hours used on parking enforcement. I'm not sure if we're ready to take that out. So if you take that piece out, you're actually recognizing some savings.
Well, let me ask this question. Do we know, and refresh my memory, do we know or have statistics on the calls that are distress and mental, what we've seen over the past year or past 6 months that the department is currently handling? Do we have that data to support this separate department? I mean, what I'm getting at is that we can have this department, but if the data doesn't support, I mean, are they just sitting there getting a check waiting for something to happen? Will it be part-time? I just want to make sure that the data kind of follows the need, because then if there's no need or if there's one every year, then what would be the purpose? I guess I just need clarity on that.
I don't think we have the data, and at least not specifically.
If I could interject, I don't have specific data, but I mean, we know that the vast majority of what the police in Albany are doing is not dealing with armed robberies. It's dealing with nonviolent, like mental health crises and, you know, crowd management at public events and things of that nature. So I think the vast majority of what the police do, and I think the police would be the first to say this, is not like, it does not need to be armed personnel. It's not like a highly violent, high risk situation. And so I think, the public safety department would be, on a day-to-day basis, the go-to service, and the police would very much be the exception to the rule if there is, a highway robbery or some kind of, weapons involved altercation in Albany, which, as we know, is highly rare and highly unlikely. Like, that would be the situation where the police, where an armed personnel must be involved. But the vast majority of like crowd control events, mental health, public safety, things of that nature, which is in our town most of what the police currently do, that could be easily shifted over to the public safety department.
Okay. All right, so it's 10:23. Does anyone else have any concerns? And we'll go ahead and take this to a vote.
I guess I wonder if the one outstanding issue really seems to be about a separate department versus the crisis response team and call center and other changes within the department. Should we have a vote on number one as a standalone? Do we want this as a, separate department or within, and then vote whichever, if it's in, then it's in, and if it's out, then it's out, and then vote on the document, all together after that?
Okay, that's fine. If you want to go ahead and make that motion, and I get a second, get a vote.
I move we take a vote on number one on the creation of a separate department, and then take a vote after that on the entire document.
Okay.
And the second, just so I understand, the department would be a standalone independent, or it would be hierarchy?
It's a good question. So I was really sort of trying to ask whether we want to strike out number one. Number one says independent. I think there may have been some divergence between the two subcommittee members on whether hierarchy or just a wall in between. As it says now, it says shall create a department, and that it's solely of unarmed personnel. So it is not written as a hierarchy.
Councilperson Anderson.
Yeah, we should vote on as written, definitely. So I apologize if I misunderstood, but
all right, I second.
All right, can we go ahead and get a vote, please?
Member Downs?
I'm a little turned around on what's a yes or a no now, even though I'm the one who stated the motion. Do you want to say how you understand the motion, Anne, or do you want me to state it and then we can go with that?
My understanding is to strike out number one. So,
Okay. So
in other
yes
words,
strikes it
not
out and
create
a
the public safety department.
Right. So a yes strikes out number one and a no keeps it. So yes.
Member Gary?
Yes.
Member Hamady?
No.
Member Johns?
Yes.
Member Locke?
Yes.
Member Newton?
Yes.
Member Oliver?
no.
Member Wright?
Yes.
So the motion passes. That means section one strikes, we strike out section one.
2.5 hours on that.
Then do we want to do a motion now to pass the rest of it? Or is there anything else that remains as a threshold issue?
No. You can go ahead and do a motion.
Hold on.
Oh, go ahead, Member Wright.
Because of the need, the budgetary, I'd like to make an adjustment on the budgetary.
Okay.
And we move that up to 40%,
Okay.
the reduction.
Sorry, what
Yeah, reduce,
you're saying 40% or greater?
correct, please, yes.
And Member Wright, do you mind just telling us your thought and moving from 25 to 40?
Because you're gonna be moving the parking,
No,
that's almost a full person that you'll be moving on from under the police onto public service, or public safety. I mean, I'm sorry.
So the way by striking number one, there actually isn't a separate public safety department right now proposed here. In other words, if I understand right, our last vote was on striking number one, and that I believe it carried, so there wouldn't be a separate public safety department.
So okay, no, but you'd have the non-harm, the traffic people would be non-harm, they wouldn't have a gun, right?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, okay.
So you say when the vote changes that to make it, the police will be doing the parking enforcement.
We have, let me jump in. We have 1 minute. So are we good? Can extend it for another 5, but I would like us to wrap things up. I can extend it to 10:40 if that works.
Just give me 5 minutes.
I
5
think
minutes so I
Member
understand.
Newton was trying to talk but was muted.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Member Newton, you're muted.
sorry. Tony, I don't think that the traffic enforcement people will cost anything. It is an additional expense.
Okay.
So it's 10:30. Let's motion to move this meeting out to 10:40, 10 more minutes, if that works for everyone.
Second.
I'll go ahead and get a roll call.
Member Downs?
Yes.
Member Gary?
Yes.
Member Hamady?
Yes.
Member Johns?
Yes.
Member Locke?
Yes.
Member Newton? Member Newton?
Yes.
Member Oliver?
Yes.
And Member Wright?
Yes.
Member Wright, did you want to finish up or did you give?
No, I'm good with what I have.
Okay. Is there anyone else before we take a vote on this final document?
We're going to vote just a minute.
State of law here?
Yeah. Is this catered?
Member Newton, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. So can we vote on this?
Yes, we definitely gonna take a vote. You want to do a motion, Member Wright?
I'll make a motion to vote on the document as it stands right now.
A second. Let me get a roll call.
Could I get a clarification? So the document stands as is with the removal of section 1, section 4, And I'm not sure what other sections, if you could scroll down.
Sure.
I assume all the highlighted sections.
I had to amend section 2 because there is no longer a public safety department. So you'll see now that the crisis response team is within the police department. And I clarified the crisis response team would be unarmed since. If you want to take a look at 2 and 3 now. Otherwise, and yes, so 1 is gone, 4 is gone, 8, 9, gone. 10A is gone. And did we stick with 40% for 11A? Or are we going back to 25?
Let's go back to 25.
So the document as it stands with the removal of section 1, 4, 8, 9, 10, and 10A.
Yeah.
And with this a slight modification on section 2 to remove the public safety department to replace it with police department.
Right.
Member Downs?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, can it also include that upon approval of this document, that it will go on the next city council meeting, February 21st?
Second that.
Member Wright, do you agree to the amendment?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And so Member Downs?
Yes.
Member Gary?
Yes.
Member Hamady? Member Hamady?
Yes, sorry.
Member Johns?
Yes.
Member Locke?
Yes.
Member Newton?
Yes.
Member
Yes.
Member Oliver?
Yes.
And Member Wright.
Yes.
So the motion carries.
Woohoo!
I would appreciate if Member Hamady can send me over the finalized document.
Will do.
All right, any final comments before we adjourn the meeting? I would like to thank everyone once again for attending the meeting and putting in work. I'm glad we were able to finalize something to bring to the council that will be important to our group and shows the hard work that has been put forth. With that said, I say good evening and meeting adjourned.